City Commission Conference meeting this 15th day of March 2022. Can I please ask all the members of the commission to please approach the dais? Okay. Okay. You are a doll. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you all. I appreciate you all being here. As you all know, can I please have quiet in the audience? Please, the meeting is beginning. The City of Fort Lauderdale is hosting commission meetings in person. So for additional information on how to view this meeting, please go to our website, www.fortlauderdale.gov/city commission meetings. I'll repeat that, www.fortlauderdale.gov/city commission meetings. To help ensure decorum, we ask that you please abide by the following guidelines. 1, please refrain from behavior that is disruptive, distractive, profane, and/or inhibits the meeting in any way. And 2, if you wish to speak on a specific agenda item, please sign up in the City Hall lobby. A member of the City Clerk's office staff will be there to assist. And that would be over here, actually, to my right. Okay, all right. All right, so thank you all for being here today. And according to our agenda, we start out with communications. And our first communication is from the Sustainability Advisory Board. Is there some member of the Sustainability Advisory Board here?
Do we have Glenn?
We wear them out at our special meeting.
Anybody here to? I think this communication had to do with fencing in the
I know what it.
train track. That's planning and zoning. So that was the communications from P&Z, correct?
Was it planning and zoning? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's P&Z.
All right. Is there? Hello,
Good
Jackie.
afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Jacqueline Scott, P&Z Chairman. At our last meeting, Jay Scheckman brought up at the end the problem with, not a problem, but the potential problem and danger of the Florida East Coast Railroad south of the river. There's thousands of units that are being built, and there's no barrier to protect people from running across the tracks. And obviously, we know there's been so many people since Brightline started, et cetera, being killed. We all agreed and felt like something has to be done to have some type of barrier between the railroad and the properties. And I think you did the same thing when Flagler Village, correct me if I'm wrong. There's protective area there, but there's nothing south of the river.
So, Alan, does FEC have an obligation to shield the public from the impact of the trains?
That's a tough question because railways are a very, very unique area of the law. I mean, obviously, there's easements on each side, but that's heavily regulated by the feds. So I couldn't answer that at this
Well,
point.
the problem it's a quagmire really for the city, because if there is fencing, it would be on their land, and we can't put anything on their land, even if we wanted to pay the expense of putting a fence on, right?
Right, unless it's further away to where we have some rights to some land, but then it kind of perhaps defeats the purpose without seeing exactly where we're talking about or the measurements. But the ability to put up fencing next to the railway, again, we'd have to refer to the CFRs and see if the federal government has, I'm sure they have control over that.
Let us look into that.
Okay, I think,
I agree with you. There should be some preventive barrier. People wander sometimes.
I think there's great potential. We didn't discuss this further than that at the board, but I think Jay sent all of you a letter in regards to trying to get the FEC to work with Lauderdale and to create a really nice, safe corridor that would connect 17th Street all the way down. So, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Anyone have any questions of Jackie Scott?
No, but I do agree with you, and I've been working on that also, rails with trails, parallel to the FEC track, and just trying to get the right of way. I know they increased the fee that they are charging us currently with our current right of way, which is, like you said, in the Mass District, so that's problematic. So I think, but with the safety issues that you also bring up and the paper has highlighted, I think this is now the opportunity to really force them to do something. A fence probably with a trail next to it, the best.
Yeah, Mayor, I've been
working with FECR, legally, and I've kind of looked into this a little bit, I don't think we have a forcing ability on this. I think we're somewhat limited, so I think it's got to be more of a partnership on this.
Right.
And there's, I think some folks at FACR that, have been very open to working on with Commissioner Rice, myself on Lauder Trail. And so I think we kind of keep those conversations going, and specifically about this, to try to move it forward. But it's not going to be easy.
Well,
Well,
especially,
it could, as long as it's cooperative, I guess we could, talk with FEC.
Yeah, that dialogue is going to be best, yeah.
and we're also in negotiations with the tunnel or the bridge, so this would be a good time also to say tunnel or bridge with some rails with trails. So
I agree.
package it.
Good point, Vice Mayor. Alan Rubin and Matt Allen had asked to speak on this issue. Are they here? Alan Rubin and Matt Allen. Okay. All right.
I saw the presentation last night with the tunnel, all four options from the county, and it did speak to buffering or walls where pedestrians were going to be impacted, both south of the river and even down at Mash District where it starts to curve, 4th and 5th, I think it is, northeast. So they spoke of that in the presentation.
Where was this presentation?
It was at my agenda meeting. I had them come out and explain it. Since so much misinformation was going out in the community, I wanted them to hear it from the county, not from me. And it's a county project. I know we have given our opinion in terms of what we would like to see, but the county and the MPO makes the last decision on that. So I wanted my constituents to know what was going on. But in that presentation, they did speak to those areas, troubled areas, as Jackie just mentioned, and as folks up in Progresso and the Mash District, where the road begins to wind, how you separate pedestrians, trains, and all those vehicles. So it was brought up.
All right, great. Okay, moving on to the next item, Business 1, redistricting report prepared by Florida Atlantic University. Do we have representatives from FAU?
We do, Mr. Mayor. This we'll let them get set up and kick this off. Lillian, do you have anything you'd like to announce before they present their presentation? Lillian Rosa with our Professional Standards Office has been our city point of contact to the redistricting process, and she is aware of how we went through it a decade ago, so I asked her to take the lead again during this process. We'll let her introduce the presenters, and then we'll let them take it away.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor.
You're going to have to pull that mic closer.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. I'm Lillian Rosa from the City Manager's Office.
I'm really,
Sound like the mayor.
I'm
Speak so softly.
I'm Lillian Rosa from the City Manager's Office, and I'm here to introduce our consultants on the redistricting process. The city charter requires us to, after the census figures are released every 10 years, to redistrict and reapportion to make sure that our 4 commission districts are approximately equal in population. We contracted with FAU to engage in that process, and they have conducted an analysis and presented a report that was sent to you last week. And they're here to talk about the report and also answer any questions you have. This Thursday, there will be a public workshop to allow city residents to come in and voice their opinion, make suggestions on any new map boundaries. So I'd like to introduce Professor Stephen Barasa from FAU, and he can talk about the report. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having us. Just for a point of clarification, I'm not Dr. Barasa. My name is James Gamma Clark. Dr. Barasa is in the audience with us this afternoon rather.
is he camera shy?
He might be a wee bit.
Okay.
Either way, I got the short end of the stick. So, thank you very much for having us. It's a great honor and privilege to be here. Again, my name's James Cameron-Clark with the Florida Atlantic University, specifically the Geosciences Department, and we're here this afternoon to present the district analysis for the city of Fort Lauderdale. Our outline for this afternoon will review very quickly the redistricting team. We'll talk about those parts of the city charter that are pertinent to redistricting. We'll review our redistricting parameters. We'll go over very quickly the process that we've been asked to engage on your behalf. And then we'll get to the meat of the presentation where we'll discuss the existing districts and how they relate to both the 2020 US Census enumeration and the 2023 population projection that we've been asked to prepare for you. And of course, we'll end with a brief summary. So as I mentioned, Dr. Barasa is here with us. He is the chair of the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at Florida Atlantic University. I'm a senior instructor with the Department of Geosciences. We also have two other members of our team, Dr. Schultz, also a member of the Department of Geosciences, and Michael Stamm with the Department of Urban and Regional Planning. So the city charter reads, the city commission shall, by ordinance, adopt, create, and establish 4 separate and distinct geographical districts. These shall be of contiguous territory and approximately equal in population as is practicable. Any non-contiguous parcels, of which there are several in Fort Lauderdale, shall either be part of one of the districts, or if such parcels has a population approximately equal to the other commission districts to be created, then such parcels may be a commission district. And finally, after each decennial census, the city commission shall reestablish the boundaries of the 4 commission districts so that the district shall be as approximately equal in population as is practicable. And of course, that's why we're here this afternoon.
So if we're trying to reshape these districts, we can take a non-contiguous portion of the city and assign it a part of a district, even if it's not contiguous?
Yes, in fact, I believe that has been done. And of course, if you had a non-contiguous portion that was about 50,000 people, which there isn't, then it could be its own district.
Got it. Good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So our general parameters are as follows. As the city charter suggests, our first priority is to make sure we have reasonable population equality across districts. But specifically, we work to ensure that there's a maximum 10% overall deviation from the ideal size across the districts. And this is consistent with legal precedent. The other thing that we seek to do, of course, is to make sure that we're consistent with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, specifically Section 2, which states that arbitrary dilution of minority population clusters and other discriminatory practices are prohibited. So, of course, we work to make sure that we're consistent with the Voting Rights Act. Our second priority is to seek, where possible, geographic contiguity and appropriate compactness. We will work to follow major natural and man-made boundaries where possible. We will work to maintain respect for the integrity of communities of interest, and we will seek to minimize the degree of change in pre-existing patterns to the degree that that's possible. So population balance is our primary driver, but the other factors that we list here are significant in guiding our decisions towards reaching population equity. So the process that we've been asked to engage in is to prepare 2 reports. The first report I'm here to present to you today, that's a current district analysis and population projections of your existing commission districts. And the second report, which will be back in the very near future, is to actually engage in the redistricting process. And it's at that meeting and that report where we will discuss commission options. As Lillian was referring to, we're going to have a public meeting on Thursday, but we're getting feedback from the community, and we'll certainly try to take that feedback into consideration as we are developing those options. Excuse me. So the data that we use for this analysis, there's 2 sets of data. The primary set of data is the US Census Bureau's 2020 Census Redistricting Summary File. And this is the same data set that's used by all government agencies across the country as they go through their redistricting efforts. What's different in our case is the specific data set that we use. We're using the census block, whereas if you're doing a congressional district redistrict, for example, you might use a census tract. And the reason we use a census block is because that's necessary when you're working at the municipal level to get the spatial resolution required to carve up communities to achieve, in this case, about 49,000 people each. So each of these census blocks are going to be aggregated to form each of the 4 voting districts for the city of Fort Lauderdale. The second data set that we were asked to use was housing data that was provided to us by your city staff. And we used this data to create population estimates to account for developments that have occurred since Census Day of 2020. That's April 1st of 2020, projected out to January of next year, January of 2023. So what you see on your map and what you see on your report is the district boundaries as they presently stand. Here we see, of course, you're very familiar with these, but here you see the districts for the entire city. And here we see a close-up of the northern portion of the city, and again, the southern portion of the city. So let's take a look at the 2020 census data. Based upon that data, we see that the city of Fort Lauderdale's population was 182,760 on April 1st of 2020. If we divide that by 4, that gives us an average population for each district of 45,690. As I alluded to before, city staff also identified developments that were not included in the 2020 census, but are expected to both be constructed and occupied by January of 2023. The reason, of course, that we do this is that you don't want to go to the expense and effort of going through the redistricting process only to find that as soon as you're done, the districts are already out of alignment. And we've certainly found in our preliminary analysis that that would have been the case. If we had done this redistricting effort only using the 2020 data, it would already be out of alignment. So it's a good thing that you've asked us to do this.
It will already be what now?
Out of alignment. Yeah. Unbalanced. So in total, we find that 16,148 people will be added to the city by 2023 since the census of 2020. The majority of these residents, 12,278, will be located in District 4. Much of the remaining expansion will be added to Districts 2 and 3. Good. So taking that projection into consideration, we find that by 2023, the population of Fort Lauderdale will be just under 200,000 at 198,908. This gives us an average population for each district at 49,727. This will be the magic number that we work towards. This will be the number that we try to make each district have at the end of this redistricting process. So what we find then is, looking at this population projection, that the largest district in 2023 will be District 4 at 60,364 people. That's 10,637 people, or 21.39% more than the theoretical average. The smallest district, meanwhile, will be District 1 at 42,614 people. That's 7,113, or 14.3% less than the theoretical average.
Exclusive.
It's important now to take a pause and look at some of the demographics for these districts. These demographic categories are not defined by us, they're defined by the US Census. And if you look at the bottom here, you see various columns in the table that refer to the census definition of both race and ethnicity. So according to the US Census, the city's majority race and ethnicity are white at 51.8%, and the majority ethnicity is not Hispanic or Latino at 83.9%. You'll also see highlighted in the table District 3. And the reason that's highlighted is because here we have a minority-majority district where Black or African American is the majority race at 75%. And again, the reason I'm highlighting that is because the 1965 Voting Rights Act specifically prohibits the dilution of votes or minorities in any district. And so as we go through this redistricting process, that's something that we'll have to pay very close attention to make sure that we're not doing that we're not diluting the votes of any minorities.
According to what you're saying, the benchmark is 75%, and if we enlarge District 3, it cannot go below 75% in terms of minority representation. Is that what you're saying to us?
So what the Voting Rights Act says, you cannot artificially, or in other words, you cannot maliciously reduce that percentage. So I wouldn't interpret it to say that you can't drop, a few fractions of a percent. But what you cannot do is go into that district and carve up that population so as to reduce the voting power of that population group. That's correct.
So if you add to the district and it dilutes it, that's one thing, but you can't remove.
You could add or subtract and result in dilution. So it's not just a question of adding, but what we're trying to do is make sure that, again, we don't engage in gerrymandering. That's why you hire an independent consultant, right? So you don't have to worry about that. You're to be commended for hiring a university to come in that has an independent view of this. We don't have a dog in this fight in terms of any group, whether it's political or racial or ethnic. We're completely independent. And so I'm not saying that you can't see that percentage drop a little bit or increase a little bit, but what we can do is engage in gerrymandering process where we go in and crack up that district to dilute the voting power of that particular group or any other group.
Okay, got it.
Good. So the current commission districts are heavily imbalanced. The total deviation is presently 44.29% between all 4 districts. The spread, that is the difference between the largest district and the smallest district, is 35.69%. That's what you get when you add 14.3 for District 1 and 21.39% for District 4. So 35.69%, that's quite considerable. Both of these values exceed the maximum 10% overall deviation from the ideal size across the districts. It's also worth noting that as a product of the city's rapid growth, and as I alluded to before, since 2020, when the population imbalance was already in place in the city's commissions, the mean deviation has more than doubled from 5.06% to 11.07%, and the spread has almost tripled from almost 13% up to 35.69%. So the moral of this particular story is that if this pace continues, if this fantastic growth that you've seen continues, you may find yourself in a situation where redistricting will be necessary again prior to the next decennial of the census in 2030. So to summarize, a realignment of the City Commission election district boundaries to better balance their population is required. The overall pattern of district boundary changes will need to increase the population of Districts 1 and 3 while reducing that of District 4 to make the population more equitable between the districts. This will necessitate an adjustment of the geographic boundaries where District 1 and 3 must expand in size while District 4 must compact. Furthermore, due to the unique geography of the city boundaries, as we're going to have to expand District 1, that district's going to have to come south down the eastern side of the city, and this is going to lead to a domino effect that will affect all the other districts. And thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them.
So
Okay.
as you look to grab from 1 and 4 or disperse and try to keep that balance you spoke of in the 1964 Act, what happens if those populations shifted? People left those areas. How do you capture that demographic?
So we have to go by the data that we have at hand. The only demographic data, the best available demographic data, is from the most recent census. If there's been any changes since April 1st of 2020, it's not possible for us to recognize that without going ahead and recreating the work of the US Census, which of course is impossible for us to do. Well, almost impossible for us to do without going to great expense on the part of the city.
And how do you feel about the maps that you created for the county?
I wasn't involved in that process. I couldn't comment on that.
I think they were very good maps.
Good.
Even though I didn't particularly care for the way one that I liked in particular was, but I think the process made it fair, and this is why I debated to leave our old process and use this process because of the school of knowledge that you all cater to make it fair and equitable, so that there's no gerrymandering. Typically, people that wear these titles really want to grab people that will favor them, and I just think that map was such a good map that you did with the county, and I'm sure it will be the same here for the city. And we will be watching.
Just to clarify, FIU was involved in your county maps?
But it's still the same process. It's
Yes, the
independent.
methodology is the same, correct.
Right, methodology, that works every time. When you put us in something, when we get involved, we tend to be political, we tend to stretch, to favor remaining in these seats forever. I do not desire to do that. I'm different, however, any advantage I can get, I would take, but I think fair is what will always make sure that we will have the proper representation sitting at these tables or these daises as you look across the country.
Can I just ask one question about the process? So Thursday, you'll meet with neighbors, and then do we have the opportunity to meet with you to give you our input, or do you not meet with us, or do we do it collectively, or is now the time to give you our input?
So, we've done this process over the decades with many cities. With each city, it's always a different process. In this case, we've not been asked to meet with you directly.
Say that again?
In this particular case, we have not been asked to meet with each of you individually outside of this particular meeting. I believe, the feedback that you would give to us is at this particular setting.
Okay, so since I'm District
But let me
1.
interject. I'm not opposed to the meeting.
No, sure, I don't really have,
So if you wanted to, we would certainly facilitate that. But that's up to you.
well, I'm happy to give my comments in public too, and we are allowed to give our comments and say what we think should be a reasonable boundary. I mean, all this is allowed. Well, I'll just tell you what I'm thinking. So I'm District 1. I have a very happy, great district. So I'm going to expand and take on more of our city, which I'm thrilled about. So Steve lives 1 block away from my district. I would
Thank you.
not like to pick up Steve and run against him.
Drop him off.
So unless you want to move, because I know you built that place and you've been the president forever, I would prefer to move south of west of Federal, south.
Well, let's let them come up with the maps, and you're
No,
welcome
but I
to
think
meet.
I can give that input though, right? That's my only input I have. I don't really want to run against Steve, and I
But
think
Mayor,
they do that.
Mayor, she's saying she wants to take your neighborhood, go
Yes,
west of
that's
Federal
fine.
into Poinsettia Heights.
I can,
I'm sure I'll be represented admirably by any one of you.
thank you.
Well, I think that's what the process is trying to avoid.
No, I think go ahead.
We saw it at the county, and some people woke up in a different district.
You know, wake up.
But that's what redistricting is. When we do what you're suggesting, it water downs the process. I mean,
Well, everyone, you can give
I
suggestions.
think I'm
no,
allowed
just
to give
saying,
input.
but that's what we were trying to
It's not
avoid.
as long as
But-
it's legal. I know they do this at the state level. They
yeah,
try
but
not
look-
to.
But look who's leading the state.
Yeah, I like them.
No, you can.
I like,
Right? He doesn't want it. He doesn't do it, but
He could take it
here's
or
the
leave
local
it.
level. I'm not trying to
yeah.
dismiss you. I just think the mayor is correct, and so is
Yeah.
city manager. We can't give input, but I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at something very similar too, right at the Flagler. You know, if it reaches, it can grab me too.
Right. Well, Steve, maybe you'll give input that you'd really love to run against me. I don't know.
All right.
Mayor, I just had a couple of questions.
One quick question first. Are we required to use the 2020 census numbers, or can we make the adjustments as you have, as we now determine that the populations have increased over the last several years?
Well, I believe we're using both, Mr. Mayor. We're using both the 2020 data as the base.
Right.
And then we've used your very reliable CO data to project out. So
Are we allowed to do that?
certainly, we've done that in every other,
Okay.
almost every other city that we've done this particular cycle. The city charter specifically calls on you, which is different from some of the other charters we've seen. But your particular city charter says you must use the census data. We've done that.
Right, but I mean, is it requiring us to use only the census data?
I would have defer to your
At some point, that needs,
your attorneys on
we
that
need to
matter.
know that.
But, you know, it's certainly consistent practice, not abnormal at all to add on a population projection, especially in this particular cycle, because it's worth noting that the 2020 data was significantly delayed in its release
Totally,
by the
I'm not
pandemic.
disagree with anything what you said. I think it was compromised for so many reasons. And so what you've done to try to extrapolate from those figures and make appropriate adjustments is laudable. But at the same time, I'm not sure if our hands are tied. So at some point, we'll know that. Okay, Commissioner Glassman.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So first of all, thank you for your work. And in reading your report, just a couple of questions. So what makes you only go till January 2023? How's that date chosen?
Well, when we do these projections, you know, we try to work with developments that are not only in planning, but have been approved and are shovel-ready. We don't want to include developments that are hypothetical, or, you know, sometimes a developer, for example, might work on a project only with the intent to perhaps sell it to another builder. So we're looking at stuff that's ready to go and not hypothetical.
Okay, 'cause the reason I ask is I'm looking at, you have a table, table 1.
Yep.
Where you list all of these projects that you expect to come online.
On page 3.
Yes. So if you look at the last subdivision item that you have there, that says Ex Las Olas. I don't even think that building has started to come out of the ground, so I don't know how you could have almost 3,000 people ready to move in January.
Yeah, I mean, we asked, I don't want to throw anybody in the bus, but, you know, we asked for data from the city for projects that were going to be completed by January 2023, and this is what we were given to work with.
Okay, so would you consider that 3,000 people statistically significant?
It's certainly 30,000 people is a lot of people, yes.
Yes, that's why I'm questioning it, yeah.
Yeah, if we're told that that project is not going to be completed by January 2023, we can absolutely remove that from our analysis.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention that just so we can you can have that discussion.
Certainly.
Thank you. Second question. It does say that on March 17th for the public meeting, for residents to weigh in on any proposed district map changes, but will they actually be seeing maps? We have not seen maps as a commission, but will they be seeing maps, or am I reading that
On March
incorrectly?
17th, there will not be map options.
Okay. So when it says that they will get a chance as a public to weigh in on any proposed district map changes, is that just going to be you telling the public verbally, well, here's a possibility, or here's a possibility, or?
Well, I think the intent of the form, and in this particular case, the project is highly compressed in the timeline. You know, we were only, the contract between FAU and the city was only recently signed. The intent is to get feedback from the public. We'll certainly take that into consideration when we're drawing those boundaries. Of course, the primary concern is going to be making sure we have population equality. But if, you know, as we saw in the city of Hollywood, for example, if we have residents that make, you know, good points and they align with the population equality, then we'll certainly take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you. And I did want to allay the fears of the Vice Mayor, because Vice Mayor, in the report recommendation, it says, basically it says, this will necessitate an adjustment of geographic boundaries where districts 1 and 3 must expand while district 4 must contract. And it actually says that District 1 would go and expand at the southernmost part of District 2, which would be the Las Olas Isles area. Because you're just thinking on the east part, but you actually go further south.
So like the mayor said, it doesn't have to be continuous?
Does have to be contiguous, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry to clarify.
Off the aisle.
There are parts of the city that are literally not contiguous with the rest of the city, and I think that's what the city charter is referring to.
Right, and I think your southern border, don't think of just the east along the Barrier Island,
Right.
which you were, but your southern border actually goes much further south, just not east.
I would say both of those are viable options. We'll look at all of those.
And that's it for me.
Potentials.
Thank you.
All right. A few people have signed up to speak. Is there anybody else on the commission who wants to?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. Hey, thanks for your work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So let's just go through again, just for clarity for the process going forward. So what happens next? The next date for in this process?
On Thursday, we're going to have a meeting with the public.
Yep. Okay. And again, I think Commissioner Glassman kind of emphasized that's going to be just input discussion, similar to, you're not going to be sharing any more information than what you're sharing today.
Correct.
Great. Okay. 317, then what happens next?
Then we come back to you next week. We will submit a report to you next week with those map options.
Okay. So that'll be the week of 321. You're going to email city manager, I guess, Chris?
Lillian, yeah.
Okay, great. So you'll get the information. So Chris,
Sorry.
question, Chris. Yep,
Sure.
no problem.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So Chris, the week of 321, you're going to get the maps or an initial design of the maps, right?
Correct.
Correct.
When you get those maps, then what happens, Chris? What do you do with those maps?
We'll distribute those maps to the commission for their consideration. We'll probably, thinking ahead, probably publish those maps for the public to be able to review them. And then I would look back to our consultants for how long that review should take. And we have published on a timeline that these will appear before you at at the meeting of 4/5, I believe, April the 5th.
I think that's right. So I think it'd be helpful if Chris, and if this is possible, as soon as you get those maps, if you can pass those on to the commission, because we have this condensed time frame to then, I think, share those with the public and, allow them to provide input and so forth. What I wouldn't want to have happen is the public get those maps, 4 days before the 4/5 meeting.
Understood and agree.
Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll get those, so hopefully we'll get those maps to the public in some form or fashion. Maybe we put them, Chris, on the city website, just so, if the city did that, then we don't have to get them out to people. Everyone can just see on the website the week of 321. Public can kind of evaluate those. And when the public has concerns or comments, what do we do, Chris? Do we get that feedback? Hear that
I
feedback?
haven't asked that question. Are we going to be in receipt of questions and comments that come from the public, or do we defer those to you?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, if we receive comments or questions, feedback from the public, do we accept that feedback, or do we forward them to you at this point?
Traditionally, when we go through this process, we usually find it's very helpful if it goes through a formal chain for sunshine reasons. So certainly, if you receive feedback and then forward it on to us, I think that would be best.
So Chris, so whatever you want to do internally.
Yeah, I mean, within a moment's notice, we could have them on the website, create its own email address for people.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
Feedback. That's all simple stuff to do.
Something like that, we could gather everything.
Yep.
So then, starting the week of 321, they could be getting a lot of good feedback from residents and so forth, and you all can start using that feedback, to evaluate and so forth. Is that?
Certainly.
Okay, and then that feedback you can use if you want or not to adjust some of the maps or what you're thinking. And so
Yes,
forth.
if they align with the parameters that we outlined,
Yeah.
then we'll certainly take that into consideration.
Okay, great. Then it sounds like on 4 or 5, you'll come back to us maybe with some updated maps, or maybe they'll be the same that you initially did. And you're going to say, okay, we've gotten a lot of feedback, and with all that feedback, here's what we think makes the most sense.
We will present a minimum of 3 options to you. We won't favor one option over the other unless you ask us our opinion on that. But yeah, we'll give you a minimum of 3 options, and then it's for the commission to choose which one they prefer.
Okay, 3 options for each district.
No.
No, 3
3
options for the
options for the
city.
entire city. So 3 sets of maps, option
Yep.
A, B, C, option 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so then by not saying it's 3 for each district, then certain districts could be the same in each of those 3 options.
Conceivably.
Okay. Will you be presenting those 3 options the week of 321 or just one option?
No. When we come back with your report next week, we will have a minimum of 3 options.
On 321?
Correct.
Great. It might be the same or different 3 options on 4 or 5.
It would be at a minimum the same 3. There would be the potential for additional modifications. Once we
Right.
present one option, we wouldn't take it off the table. We would leave that for you to do.
Yep. Perfect. That sounds great. That sounds excellent. And then, Chris, to Commissioner Glassman's point, Ex Las Olas, have we kind of double checked to make sure not only Ex Las Olas, but all these are, you said complete by January 1, 2023?
After Commissioner Glassman brought that up yesterday, we asked Anthony to do a review of that in his shop, and
Okay.
I can have him just give you a sense as to what he's discovered since yesterday when we were made aware of this and reviewed it.
And then to Commissioner
Great.
Sorensen's point, I think all of those need to be reviewed for accuracy, not just ex
Yeah.
lessors, but all of them.
Agreed.
Yeah, good afternoon, Anthony Fajardo, City of Fort Lauderdale. So we did see some discrepancies. I was just talking to Lillian Rosa, since she's heading up this effort. We're going to get that information turned around and back to them as quickly as possible, because Ex La Solis is listed on there twice. One is Ex La Solis, one is Society. The number isn't correct, so we're going to re-review everything and make sure we get it turned around.
On all of Table 1.
Exactly.
Okay, great, thanks.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Anthony. Okay, great. Excellent. Thank you. That sounds great. Thanks for
much.
your work on this. I appreciate it. Mayor, that was all I had.
Okay.
Can I just say something to?
Go ahead.
This point? Chris,
Sorry.
what's our drop dead date for the county?
They've asked, the supervisor of elections has asked for this by the middle of April. And if we move forward on 4-5, and then formalize it within the week, we will meet the deadline.
4-5.
It'll be before you 4-5. The supervisor of elections has asked for it to be transmitted by the middle of the month, 4/15.
Okay. Thank you.
So does that mean we start representing our new neighborhoods on 415?
No, it just goes into play for the
I'll have to
demographic.
defer as to when
Once you
it's approved.
approve the maps, you have your new districts.
Yes, the county, as soon as they approve their maps, that was their new district. So you will have a new
Could be
district.
representing Commissioner Glassman on 415.
Yes. And I'll be calling you a lot. I'll be calling you a lot.
He complains a lot, I'm telling
I
you.
literally woke up.
No comment.
Different,
We'll have a lot of fun, don't worry.
Oh, yes, yes.
we'll wake up differently. Trust me.
Yes, I think.
Jackie Fernandez and Alberto Fernandez, you're part of the team, right? These are people that signed up to speak on this.
All right. 415.
What's that?
Yeah. Who wants to speak on this?
If you did, I don't have it. Oh, okay. You'd be surprised.
Not at this point. I mean, the process.
Well, I guess Mr. Brown, Bill Brown, has something to say.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the Commission. Bill Brown, President, Central Beach Alliance. My comment or question is, 10 years ago when this process was done, the committee kind of looked at the neighborhood associations and tried to not be as disruptive on the redistricting process. And I'm wondering if there's any consideration in this process to try to keep the civic associations and the neighborhood homeowners associations as much intact within one district commission's area instead of having a homeowners association reporting to maybe possibly two commissioners. Thank you.
Okay. Did you hear that?
Yep, that makes sense.
Yes, that makes absolute sense. As we mentioned in the redistricting parameters, we will certainly work to keep communities of interest together. The only caveat is that that's not always possible, but that would certainly be a goal.
Okay. It's up to us anyway, the final decision, so. All right, very good. Anybody else have anything else to add? Thank you so much for your work. We'll hope to see you soon and put this project to bed. A lot of anticipation. Okay, business 2, Bahia Mar discussion. This afternoon, we have quite a few people sign up to speak. This afternoon, we will hear This afternoon, we'll hear a presentation by our city staff, keeping in mind that this commission had delegated to me the responsibility of working with the leaseholder on the Bahia Mar site. Over the last several months, I've been having regular meetings with members of Ron Bahia Mar in order to try to come to terms with regard to a site plan as well as to the terms of a new lease agreement, which would include the financial arrangements between the landlord and the tenant. So the city had contracted with Colliers to assist us in calculating what would be an appropriate amount of return that we could expect as a city based on the value of the land and the improvements that are intended to be on this site. And is anyone here from Colliers to make that presentation?
Ken
Is someone
Krasnow.
from Colliers here?
Yep, Ken is approaching the podium.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Ken Krasnow from Colliers. Yes, as you described, we are here to give you a high-level overview of the report that we produced that I believe you're all in receipt of. And again, we are, my predecessor from FAU said, we also have no dog in this fight. We are here to just give you our assessment of the current deal structure as it pertains to real estate values, market value, et cetera. And we'll take you through the analysis. There's a lot of numbers in here, so I'm going to try to walk you through the methodology. I'm not going to go through every page of the report. And then obviously we'll be available to answer any questions. So basically what you see in the report is we went through the site plan, the lease agreement. We ran a projection for the 99-year lease, which again you have in the report. We then broke it out so that you can see how payments would be distributed on an annual basis. We looked at the various revenue sharing components and how that would be attributed to both city and the community trust fund. That's a quick overview of kind of where we are. So again, just starting with the basic parameters, I think you're obviously all aware that Integra Realty Resources performed an appraisal of the site, which again is just sort of summarized here in front of you. Their hypothetical market value for sort of we'll call it the clean site was $256 million. Generally, we are in concurrence with that. And then they have various components of what the value would be worth based on the income that's in place, as well as additional surplus properties of $48 million and $72 million. That was
And
complete.
for the public, and I'm sorry to interrupt, because I get this question a lot. Explain to the public why that says hypothetical and what that means on the.
Your land is encumbered. You have a current lease in
No,
place.
I understand, but I just want to make sure everyone
So
understands.
hypothetically, if the land was free and of encumbrances, it was sitting there as a 39-acre site, that's what it would be worth.
Thank you.
Ken, does the party that encumbers a site affect the value?
I mean, I'm not going to speak for an appraiser and how they do it technically, because they may have certain requirements they may not look at. We would look at, the underlying quality or the capability and we would assess the viability of the encumbrances, but that's more, again, from an opinion of value as opposed to an actual appraised value. So I can't necessarily comment on what an appraiser, how they would look at it.
Okay. I'm wondering who can. In other words, I don't know if you're tracking this. So if I'm interested in a party, but I own the leasehold on it, does that fact that I hold the leasehold affect the value versus if someone else is?
Commissioner McKinsey held it, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you're getting my question.
There's some, again, we look at it from that
I just don't
perspective.
know.
I don't know.
I would
if
think it
your
would.
dollar is the same as his dollar from an appraisal perspective. They would look at it the same way. We might look at it and say, Party X, 42 bankruptcies.
Right, but in other words, if I'm encumbering myself, right, in an agreement, does that? Chris, do you know what I'm saying here? Is that?
Ask me one more time.
Obviously not.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I was.
You're probably not the only one. I don't know if I know what I'm saying.
Hey.
And the answer may be no, which is fine. does who encumbers the property affect the value of the property for that, the potential value of that property for that leaseholder? In
So
other words,
let me look to Ken and answer, and let me see if I can talk through that. So there would be certain uses on a property that would not necessarily be highest and best, right? And so there could be a use that would change the underlying value of a property, because sometimes we do appraisals based upon the use and sometimes we do them on highest and best. So there would be a delta there potentially.
Yes.
Are you asking though as to who it would be? So you,
Right.
if person A is doing number one and person B is doing number one, who actually is doing it, I don't think would quantify, because there's no way to really project that. It comes down to what the uses are, not exactly who's doing it.
Say that again.
yeah,
Say that again.
The way I understand the commissioner's question is who would be doing basically the who's encumbering it.
right.
So it doesn't matter who's encumbering it, you look at the uses. So whether it's corporation A or corporation B, as long as the use is the same, there's not going to be a way for you to qualify what changes there may be between corporation A and B doing it.
And that was what I was intending to say if it didn't come across the same.
Yeah,
I
It
agree.
sure did.
see if I'm kind of
I just want to make sure I understand that.
okay. Go ahead,
Since you brought it up.
Right.
So, what's an encumbrance?
An encumbrance is how how the property is essentially being used or restricted in uses. So right now you have a lease on that property, that's an encumbrance on it.
Right.
There's certain things you can, certain things you can't do. So that's being encumbered by Ron Bahia Mar right now. But replace the who, as long as the uses and the encumbrances stay the same, it doesn't matter who is doing it.
Right. So the appraisal comes back. You think fair or not fair? The appraisal. It's based,
Well,
based
that
on
I-
those.
that I-
It's based on what you just said. Am I correct? I'm asking.
I presume it's based on that. I can't tell you whether it's fair or not. No, it's just, it's the identity. I'm answering the commissioner's question. The identity who actually has the encumbrance doesn't change the value.
It's the use,
So,
right?
so,
It's the
so
use
if I had
and
it, it's-
zoning.
it's the-
It's
it's
the
still the
use
same.
and the zoning, correct?
so go back to their first scenario. If I had it,
Yeah.
it doesn't change anything, right?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay. I just want to understand it. 'Cause-
Right. You're
But it does affect the value because obviously there is a lease in place for 41 years, correct?
right, but the.
It does, but it doesn't matter who has it. So if Ron Bahia Mar sells it to Mickey Mouse Corporation tomorrow, okay, as long as the encumbrances are the same, the lease is the same, the uses are the same, and you're going to 2062, whether Ron Bahia Mar is doing it or Mickey Mouse Corporation is doing it, it wouldn't
But
necessarily change.
here's my philosophical question is, an encumbrance potentially diminishes the value of land due to the limitation in use,
Right.
right?
Right.
If it's a leasehold held in privity between an entity and an individual that's interested in engaging with that land further, extending the lease further, that encumbrance to a degree is self-imposed.
No, I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because what's happening here is that currently, if Ron Bahia Mar wanted to sell, and they said, okay.
Want to sell what?
Wanted to sell the lease.
Want to sell the lease? Okay.
Right, okay, so there's a value that's been assigned to the property based on the value of the lease, all right? But the way he came up with you sit down. The way he came up with the $256 million is
Yep.
if there were no restrictions, no
Right.
encumbrances, based on the current zoning of 12 stories, right? And the fact that it's strip clean, because because Ron Bahia Mar wants a strip clean property. They want to take away the encumbrance. They want to take away the height limitations, okay?
You want to take away height limitations?
Well, if you look at the new site plan, it's more than 12 stories, right?
I don't know what they want to do. I haven't
Oh, you haven't seen the
talked with
site
them.
plan? Oh, okay. I thought we've been discussing it. Okay.
No,
So,
how high do they want to go?
Well, we're going to discuss that. But right now,
Okay. Heard that.
But just looking at a property that's stripped clean, okay, of any existing lease, okay, Colliers has estimated the value of the property at 256, and the reason why that's appropriate is because Ron Bahia Mar wants to be stripped of the existing lease, and they want a new lease that allows them to do a different use than what they currently are allowed to do.
But there's also the point, Mayor.
That's the appropriate price to,
So 256 million is appropriate price
appropriate price to assign as value
For right
to
now.
that site.
for right
going
now.
Forward.
Okay. Okay. So the fact that it's encumbered doesn't affect
It doesn't really it doesn't part of this conversation anymore.
Oh,
We're
interesting.
allowed to,
Okay.
we're allowed to think past it.
Huh. Okay. Got it. So then my question is kind of not substantive because we're saying
All your questions are substantive.
yeah, appreciate it. Most
Relevant, maybe not. but
Most might not be, exactly. Most might not be. So what we're saying is, even though there is an encumbrance, that encumbrance doesn't really matter as we evaluate
You're
the
going to a
value
clean
of the
slate.
land,
We want a clean.
because we're not diminishing the value of the land in our analysis as a commission by the encumbrance. We're acting as though in our evaluation as a commission that it's not encumbered.
Correct.
Okay.
But
Great.
Mayor,
Okay,
you
that's
also need
new.
to look at it from the other side, because if the city ever decided to sell that land, it is encumbered. Whoever bought it would not be able to do anything for 41 years.
That is correct.
So that does affect the value of the land.
But we're dealing with the same party who wants to enter into a new agreement with the encumbrance removed. So what the hypothetical you brought up is not really pertinent, since the city is not, this is not a discussion about selling the property. This is a discussion about possibly entering into a new lease agreement, which would allow different uses than what's already approved, and which allows the city to now look at this property based on the actual fee simple value.
But it is a discussion of the appraisal, because if someone wants to take a look at the appraisal and then decide on a percentage for a cap for revenue going forward, that is very much in play
Well,
then.
why don't we let
Okay, I'm
Ken
just saying,
continue his discussion?
I'm just saying there are several ways to.
We're jumping
right.
the gun here.
I understand.
Well, I have
No
one
problem.
last question about all this.
Yes, Vice
Following up, so we have the 256 million, but does that include what they may be able to do, which is the proposed site plan, or is that just wiping the slate clean and saying you have possibilities? Does the 256 million kind of, you said it's hypothetical, is it hypothetical based on a clean slate, or is it hypothetical based on the proposal?
Clean. Clean.
Because if we voted on the proposal, then maybe it would be worth even more money, because then we just gave it more rights.
You know, we can weigh those options once Mr. Krasno finishes.
Okay, I'm just wondering though, like with Ben, so we have the
all
256.
kinds of options
that
here.
clean, maybe it's 300 if we really actually approve this, and now it's super valuable because we just gave it all these rights based on our
I see what you're
approving
saying.
all this. Or it's encumbered, so now we're only down to 40 million. So we have a encumbered price, a clean slate price, and a proposed price.
Right, so let's let him finish, and he
Okay.
can
But I
can
didn't see the
explain
proposed
to
price
us
on it. Go ahead.
his analysis.
Okay, so
Got through one page, go ahead. Anything else?
we're on page one. Okay, so just to set the stage for the assumptions that are in the proposal. So again, based on the current agreement that's in place and some land values, condo values, commercial values, et cetera, which I'll go through in a second, this gives you a sense of the total income the city would receive based on the 99 years. So again, there's a general assumption that the value of the condominiums will increase 2.5% per year, that 7.5% of the condos will sell every year. And that's relevant because you do share in the future sales. There is a base price that we've made an assumption in the original report that the condos will sell for $2,000 a foot. We all know that the market is already, especially for these kind of branded units, have already surpassed that. I'll get to the conversation a little bit later. But again, very conservatively, this is at $2,000 per square foot when they sell the condos. And again, the ground rent for both the office retail space, commercial, hotel, marina, various percentages there. And then there's a ground rent on the residential that will be built, that was $1.50 a foot. So these were not, these are not the terms that are in the proposed agreement as you sit here today. These were just some of our assumptions, which gave you a total income over the 99 years of approximately $2.4 billion, or roughly $24 million a year. The report then breaks down. So as you see there, the first two numbers there are the upfront revenue share. So when they sell the condos initially, they build the buildings and they sell the condos, the city will share in that initial sale price. So that's what the 69 and the 5 million represent. Again, that's at $2,000 a foot, at $2,500 a foot, which is more in line with today's market or where the market will be in 2 or 3 years.
Can you
that
stop for a
number
second?
is
Can you stop for a
approximately
second?
100 million. Yes.
Can we turn off the subtitles here? Because we're trying to read on our screen and it's covering up everything what you're saying.
Got it. So we need to then change your feed. So that would, there we
is it
go.
on
Is that
our
better?
iPad?
That's a lot better, actually.
Yeah, that is clearer
That's
too.
I
clear
wish I'd
too.
done that
Yeah.
earlier. I've been fumbling with this
Much
thing all
better.
night,
Yeah.
like I'm at home.
All right.
I'm not-
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
You got a
interrupt.
problem,
All right.
Steve?
Because it
I'm
was
not
hard,
speaking- I'm not
it was
speaking clearly
blurry, and I thought it was just my eyes, and then I thought, my drinking and.
It's all of that.
Yeah.
So I'm
No wonder you
laying
couldn't add
out
that
for
stuff
you how the 99 years of income is reported. That's why you see some numbers in that first year. Again, that's the one-time payment that you get when the condos are originally sold. And then
And Ken, sorry, just from a very high level. So the total 99-year income, who is that income going to? The $2 billion?
City.
you. And
Okay,
your-
the city.
and your
So over
constituent.
99 years? Okay. Sorry? Good. So over 99 years, 2.3 billion, right?
Correct.
Okay. Average annual income, so each year the estimate is about 23 million, you're saying. And now you're breaking out in year one, what it
Through
would,
99. In your report, it goes every year. You can
Yep.
see what it's like in year 50, in year 65,
Yep.
and
right. And so you're saying for year one, basically it's gonna be a total of 88 million to the city, and here's a breakout of that 88 million
yes.
that the city will get? Okay, great, thanks. I just wanted.
As we move on, this is a breakdown of the annual payments. So again, the ground rent, which is the rent that you will receive, as you can see there in the shaded, the office retail of approximately 88,000 feet, the hotel and the marina, you will receive a share of the revenue that is generated. So that equates to the 3.1 million. And then you also get a ground rent on the residential that's built. So there's approximately 1 million square feet of residential that will be built that will encompass the 410 units. And at $1.50 a foot, that adds another 1.6 million. So at the top line, that's the 4.7 million that you would receive on an annual basis, and property taxes, and then the transfer fee, which I think is on the next page. Oh, this is the taxes, sorry.
And Ken, hold on, let me some questions. And maybe this is for Chris or Alan. So I'm just going back to page 4, year one, where we've got the city will receive $88 million. Year one of what?
Once they start, what's the year one? What's that year?
Year one of what, Ken?
Is that when they get their site plan approved?
I mean,
That wouldn't be
I
when
don't
they're-
know how the lease is structured. in
Alan,
terms
would
of
that be when
it
the
gets-
site plan is approved? What is year one?
The first year.
Because we got the money spent already, I know.
Well, yeah, I mean, in theory, year one is a little bit of a misnomer. The site plan has to get built and the condos have to get sold, and then you get your, your income.
Okay, so that's, seems very gray at this point. So maybe that's the comprehensive agreement, Alan, and so forth. So it seems like we don't know when year one is, what it sounds
It
like.
shows you what the income as when the project gets built.
The entire project or portions of the project? Again, this is, I don't want to be grilling you.
Well, to
Ken,
be
'cause I know
honest with you, Ben, this is the thing is, year
you've got a
one,
lot of fidelity to
69
dig
million,
into.
this year one is
Yep.
really not year one.
Right.
Spread over the
That's my
time
point.
frame in which they build all the buildings. So year one, the 69 million for the one-time development fee is only going to be, we're only going to receive the development fee for the building that's built that year and sold. And then for every building that's built thereafter, we will get that one-time development fee. So you are correct in pointing out that we will not get the full 88 million in the first year, but we will ultimately get all of the money, the 69 million and all these, at some point as the project becomes built out. So the total will still be 2.3 billion.
Right, but it could, majority of it could be towards the end of the 99 years. We have no idea. We don't know.
Well, if they decide to build it at the end of 99 years, they may as well wrap it up right
Yeah,
now and
really.
walk away.
So I think we've just got to, this is a big business
Tighten
deal.
it up.
We want to be
I agree.
very, very
I
clear
agree.
when that check's coming in. Alan? Yeah.
So there is a base, similar to what
There's a
we
what?
have,
Sorry.
similar to what we have now, there's a base rent component. So
Okay,
the base rent as defined is essentially $600,000 per lease year through 2065. So essentially, I believe we'd be getting at least the base rent. To the mayor's point, though, until the until completion date, when you actually have the commercial improvements and so forth that are generating gross revenues, those would actually increase. You're not going to get revenue on residential units that aren't built yet. So when they're initially sold, when they're resold and things, so those things are, the number won't be static every year except for the base rent.
okay. The base rent of $600,000 to the city?
Correct. Well, that's what I have in the documents here. I don't know if they've modified that since.
Okay,
Again, these are the documents we've all gone over independently. Whether that number has changed, again, we haven't dealt so much in the numbers. That's been more
okay. So it'd be
Collier's.
guaranteed $600,000 a year, is what I'm hearing.
The thing is, let's compare it with what we're doing now. The base rent now, Susan, what's the base rent now that we're receiving? Come on, could you come up here, please?
And realistically, besides the base rent, I mean, to the extent there's still some operation, so you have the hotel there, right? So if the hotel's still operating, presuming that there's still some commercial operation, so whatever gross revenues are going to derive from the property will be added to the base rent as it is now. I just don't know to what extent, if there's going to be any period of time where there won't be any commercial component. Obviously, I don't think the marina is going to shut down, so your marina is going to still be operable, so you're going to get gross revenues from that. So that is a guaranteed 600,000 plus whatever gross revenues. I just don't know, based on their operating schedule and construction schedule, what exactly at what point in time will be operating on a commercial level.
Okay, and do we have any stipulations as to when they must be operating or when we?
No, and as we go
Okay.
through the agreements, we can.
Okay, so we've got a lot.
Susan,
Lot
what
to
is the
work there.
current base rent on this
Yikes.
side?
Good afternoon, Susan Grant, Finance Director. So the base is 300,000, and then there's a variable portion based on revenue. It's averaged, including this 300, about 1.7 a year. This year was 1.8, so there was an additional 1.5 on top of the 300.
Okay, so 1.5 on top of the 300 is what we've been receiving to date?
Or that's what we received for this most recent year.
Okay.
On the past 10, it's averaged about 1.7 combined.
Right, so the base rent is 300,000 and now they're proposing to double that.
Okay.
Okay.
So also, Mayor, according to what Ken has told us here, total 99-year income, almost $2.4 billion.
Right.
Currently, at our current rate of a 99-year income, we would be looking at 168 million right now. This is what we've been doing based on what we've inherited from previous commissions. So 168 million over 99 years versus $2.4 billion over 99 years.
Okay, well, let him finish his.
No problem.
Yeah, but hold on, I just had some questions. Where's Susan? Oh, Susan, sorry. The 1.5 million is, what's that, just broad breakout?
The 1.5 is the revenue-based piece of the calculation, so that's based on,
Marina,
yeah, a percentage of the revenue,
but Marina and what else?
at the hotel.
Hotel. Marina and hotel gets to 1.5. Okay, great. All right, thank you. And Ken, is that,
It's effectively the same components. There's a commercial component, there's a
Yep.
hotel, and then there's the marina. So the structure of the lease is effectively the same. It's just obviously being modified. The percentages are increasing, and obviously the value is increasing as part of the new development. This is really giving you a contextual of when the project is being built, residential is being built and being sold, they're going to be selling those units upfront. That's the quote-unquote one-time payment. And then as they sell over the 99 years, you're going to receive income over those 99 years. That's the transfer fee.
And how do you, Ken, how do you do, again, I'm not sharp on this kind of stuff. How do you deal with inflation when you do these projections?
So as you see there, that we forecasted that the value of the condos are going to grow at 2.5%
Right.
per year.
Yep.
And we projected that approximately 7.5%, 30 odd units of the four will trade every year. And that's a fairly conservative number as well.
But does that reflect increase in value property or inflation or
Yes.
both?
Both.
Both. So inflation and property increase is going to, each of these will only increase.
And the rents obviously grow via, CPI and so on and so forth. So you'll see, growth there as well.
So inflation and value of each condo is only combined is 2.5%. Will only increase.
Again, just a conservative number over 100 years. I mean, there's
Okay.
sometimes.
I think inflation right now is
Sessions built in, right?
7%.
But over a 99-year period, that's
Okay.
a fairly
2.5%.
conservative number.
Okay.
Yes.
A
Cool.
conservative
Okay.
approach. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Again,
But Ken, didn't I read in the documents that there is an inflation hedge in the documents to protect the city?
inflation hedge.
Is there, right, isn't there
which
something in
component
there,
is there?
Alan, when you gave us those meetings and we had all those documents?
Well, in regards to what, the annual rent?
Yes, all, the total revenue.
The total revenue?
Total revenue. Aren't we protected as a city if there is inflation?
I don't recall that.
Hold on. I'll
There's
find it.
inflation.
All right, let him finish his.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Values will go
I'm
up.
sorry.
Let him finish his presentation. Go.
Okay. So, again, just to give you a perspective of, Commissioner, when the project is, let's call it, built, right, and is working. So I just went through the ground rent components, the residential, the commercial, the retail, and the marina of approximately 4.7 million. Roughly 8.2 million of property values, again, reflecting the increased value of the property. And then the transfer fee, again, is the proportion of the condos that sell after the initial sell. So 7.5% of the condos that sell every year that grow, and that's where you get to the roughly 13.6 million on an annual basis as you go forward. This just shows you a breakdown of the taxes. Again, the taxable value, millage rate, et cetera, what gets applied to the city. So you're, again, looking at roughly 8.2 million in commercial and residential property taxes. Again, this is a fairly conservative number because as you see there, that value is predicated on a $2,000 a square foot. To your point, Commissioner, these condos aren't built today. They're going to be built over the next number of years. Condos are already selling for $2,300, $2,500 a foot on the beach today. So that value for property taxes is also very conservative and will likely be significantly higher as we go forward. And then this is the ongoing transfer fee. So again, I said roughly 7.5% of the units, so roughly 30 units a year are going to trade. And as the values increase over time, the city receives 0.375% of every one of those sales throughout, the 99 years. That's the 600,000 as you see there. This is the one-time payment, the number that you focused on, the 69 million. As I said, this is predicated on a $2,000 a square foot number. Again, apply kind of today's value of really 2,500. You're probably really at about 100 million. And this just shows you again a breakdown. There's a bonus structure which is in the lease. So the first $1,200 is 2%, and then everything over that is 5%. So again, as values increase, you are participating in the increased value of the per square foot sales as time goes on. So this is the one-time payment, that's 69. Like I said, the number is really more like 100 if you were to apply 2,500. This just shows you how that money is broken down and goes to the Community Trust Fund, again, as part of the comprehensive agreement.
Can I'm not real familiar with branded residence, but can branded residences be sold back to the hotel or the owner, the entity? Could be?
Yeah.
Okay, so if those are sold back to the entity, then there won't be future transfer fees, is that right?
You mean be put into the actual hotel component? It could be, but.
Okay, so then.
I'm not sure I'm not sure I understood the question. What's your question?
So, yeah, and I'm not familiar with hotel.
So it's a condo hotel.
You're talking about the 60 residents within the hotel, the condo hotel?
I think they're all branded residences.
Branded just means a brand, like
branded means it's Ritz-Carlton or something.
Baccarat, all that.
Right.
So that's just you pay an entity to be able to use that brand, okay?
Right. Yep.
So it ups the value of the property.
Right.
That's all this is about.
Yeah.
That's all that is. So
So
when
what's
you
the
say,
difference between branded hotel residences and branded residences?
There is 60, in the hotel, there'll be 60 units that individuals will
In
own.
the actual building, hotel building.
But Commissioner, to your
Check
point,
into
the branded residential units, though, will have access, if they wish, to the reservation system as well. So even though we're talking about the 60 units in the hotel, all the residential units will be branded and will have the capability, if the association so chooses, to take part in the reservation system, some of the recreational programs and things of that sort that's offered by the brand.
Yep.
And Commissioner, to your question, and I don't know if this is what you were referring to, in the annual residential rent, there is a CPI component that's added. So I don't know if that's what you were referring to before.
Well,
that's in the phased lease.
Right, that, but also, if we go with the structure that's been proposed by the tenant, just the mere fact that the rates will increase, I mean, we will have that hedge against inflation because of that flexible percentages going forward.
as the values of the units increase,
Right.
the percentages stay the same. So we're not accepting a reduced percentage. It's a fixed percentage. So it's based on a higher value every time it's resold. So you're right. That's the hedge against inflation.
Exactly, thank you.
So maybe let me ask my question again, because I'm not asking it well, is the city receives a transfer fee every time a unit is sold. Is that right? Am I saying that right?
Correct.
Okay. Can a hotel entity purchase a unit?
In the branded hotel
Yes.
component? I guess.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. So if the hotel buys units and holds those, then they're not sold, then they could just hold them and not sell them again, right? So we would miss out on those transfer fees.
Why would that
Future
happen?
transfer.
Well, I see what he's saying. He's saying
Why would
that,
that-
what happens if the hotel company just decides to hold them all? In other words, doesn't really want to sell them, just rent them
come on
out.
up. Yeah. I just don't know how the business model works. You look in pain, Kenny. That's not a good question.
If I may answer that.
Yeah, sure.
Introduce yourself.
My name is Jimmy Tate. I'm with the Bahia Mar Resort Marina Hotel.
Yeah.
The idea of a luxury branded resort is twofold. One, in today's market, hotel businesses have a very difficult time in the old manner of how they conduct the business making money, especially the higher end 5-star plus hotels. So what they do is they have a residential component. Typically what happens is you have a hotel which has a residential branded hotel condo unit in that building. Those are sold to third parties, and then they are immediately put into the reservation system so that the hotel can lease out those units when the owners are not using those. Those, by definition, are not fee ownership. It's a different type of ownership. The residential component of our proposal, which are in different buildings, which is also managed and controlled by the branded hotel, they do not have to be sold back to the hotel. And economically, it makes no sense for a hotel to buy those units because these units, just by the square footages, are going to be multi-million dollars. A hotel can't make money when a unit costs $600,000 or $700,000 to develop. There's no way they would buy a unit for $4, $5, $6, $7 million and put it into they can't make enough money. So technically speaking, it could happen, but probability, it will never happen. It can't happen. And the hotel wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah,
They'd rather
so-
just take someone else's unit that someone else owns it, put it into their system, and every time they lease it, they get the money without the expense of owning it.
Gotcha. Okay, so it would be legally permissible, but you're saying economically it doesn't make sense for the branded entity.
Yes,
if I'm saying
yes,
that
sir.
right.
Yes.
Okay, perfect, great, thanks. That helps. Thanks, Ken.
And so we also just wanted to, again, kind of give you a perspective here. This is not in the report, but there's been some conversations with regards to various changes in percentages of the various commercial components. So this just gives you a little perspective. Again, this is based on a $2,500 per square foot sales price. So in a couple of years, when they sell those 350 condos at $2,500 a foot, probably greater. Like I said, that as a one-time payment would be approximately $100 million. If you took that $100 million and in theory you invested it, right? The city's going to receive that money. Let's assume you got it all in upfront and you invested that. That would equate to approximately $6.2 million a year at a, call it a 6%, return, okay? The other numbers that you see on the top there are, again, various percentages of the lease, of the ground rent, and of the transfer fees. And as you can see there, the original proposal from the tenant that at the $2,500 a square foot would be roughly $2.5 billion. The numbers that we were playing with was roughly $2.8 billion. The tenant came back just a couple of days ago and offered to increase the percentages. You can see there they raised their commercial from 5% to 5.5%. They left the hotel at 4.25%. They increased the marina from 5.75 to 6.25. So that increased their total value to $2.6 billion. And then you can see we just have a few, again, I'll call it recommendations. Final is probably not the right word. That gets you to about approximately $2.7 billion. So again, these are all percentages that will be worked out in your final agreement. The reason I just kind of lay this out for you on the next slide, the $6.2 billion, again, that's kind of the static number. That's you sell the condo units, $2,500 a foot. The city receives $100 million. You invest it at a 6% return. You would get the equivalent of $6.2 million per year for the next 99 years.
And Ken, hold on, sorry, go back to that. So ground rent says dollars per square foot of residential. So
they're going to build residential towers
Yeah.
that are going to be approximately 1 million square feet. That's
Okay.
the 350 units, and on that square footage, there's a rent
Yep.
that you get, again, adjusted for CPI, between $1 and $1.50. Call
Okay.
it $1.25.
And how do you come to $1.25 or $1.50?
I mean, they're at $1. Actually, they're now at $1.25. Actually, they came up to $1.25.
Oh, no, but how did you, it looks like what's your value of square footage?
I mean, this is a market kind of negotiation, and again, you have to put all of these variables into context when you have a negotiation. So again, we think that you're within kind of a striking distance here. If you look at the various scenarios, again, you move one percentage up, you lower, another percentage, you kind of get to your ultimate negotiated price, but ultimately, the value that you're going to see, again, as I said, you sell the condos, they sell the condos, the city receives their initial share. You take that money, you spread it out over the 99 years, it's $6.2 million. These are the total numbers based on the percentages on the prior screen. So again, you're really raising, you're looking at from 11 million to, call it, when we were originally talking about a proposal, was 12.3 million. I think where we ended up was pretty close to, the 12 million. So you take those annual payments for the commercial, the marina, the hotel, and the residential, you add that to the value that you're going to get from the upfront payment of the 6.2 million, and your equivalent annual rent over the next 99 years is approximately $12 million, 11.8, give or take.
Okay, do we, and this is probably built in here, so I'm probably not knowing exactly where it's built in, but so if we're saying the value of the whole land is 256 million, is there a rental value allocated to non-developed land built into this?
Is there, you mean if you just,
What do you?
In other words, yeah, so you can go back, I'll try to explain it. So here we see the ground rent for, I'm going to call it developed or residential, right, an apartment or condo. Is it built into the full analysis somewhere, basically the rent for just the land that's not, so in other words,
I would think that, Commissioner, I think that's part of the
is.
base rent for the whole site.
Okay, where's that built in? I just want to see that.
Well, they're being charged base rent for the whole site, whether or not they have anything built on it or
The
not.
300,000?
The 600,000. That's the new number, right?
The new number 6. Okay, so 600,000 is for the rent of the.
It's the base rent for the entire site.
Okay.
Based
Okay,
compared
that's
to
what I was
300,000. So, but to your point, we're not getting any enhancements in terms of annual income from the area that's not being used for development. It's just part of the base rent.
Yep.
Does that make sense to you?
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. So in other words, for the $256 million piece, we're saying we're getting 600,000 base rent.
Base rent,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. Great. That gets it, Ken. Thanks.
Ken, when you talk about the 12 million, I'm sorry, is this just the residential, or are you also including the marina, the commercial?
Everything.
This is everything.
But
Just
not
want to make
the
sure.
taxes.
Right. No, not the property tax.
Taxes are separate.
Oh, no, I understand. That would be, that would be what?
That's
Another
without-
6 million or something.
That's
I
without
understand.
taxes.
I'm good. Thank you.
But again, does that 12 million assume all 350 or 410, whatever units are built?
Yes,
Right, which is not going to happen in year one.
not year one, but this is.
Absolutely not. So,
This is over the 99, this is over the 99-year lease.
right, this is, yeah, maybe on average, this would be kind of what we get.
What I've been told, and I'm sure they're going to comment on it, that the build-out is probably over a, 3 to, 6-year period is
Yeah. So
probably
it'd be, okay, so year one.
total build-out, right? I mean,
So you'd maybe build
you'll
up.
get some rent
Yeah, build up
as
to
it's
maybe
being-
12
as it's
million.
being built and as it's being developed.
Right.
But, when you really look at, again, in context of a 99-year lease, I think it was just important to show, kind of the upfront and then what you would expect to receive on a annual basis as a stabilized, project.
Yep, okay, thanks.
All right.
That is my presentation.
Questions and thank you. Thank you.
I would just like to ask Ken. So Ken, you dug into these numbers, you got into the weeds. What do you think? Is this a good deal for the city? Is it not? Should we do better? What's your professional opinion on that as a person involved in real estate?
Again, I'm not commenting on what could, should be done with land or so on and so forth, but from a financial perspective, yes, this is a very strong proposal for the city. to participate in what we think is going to be, what looks like to be a monumental project that is going to generate a lot of revenue over, the course of the next 99 years. This is a very, very strong and well-balanced proposal because you're, again, participating in the future upside. Like I said, I think we've already accounted for increase in values of what we're seeing on the beach. I mean, we're working on a project in Miami Beach now where the condo sellouts are $5,000 a square foot. I mean, these prices are.
Where's that? Where's that? Where's it 5,000 a square foot?
That's where they're it's on 50.
Is this Sunny Isles?
Collins, no, Miami Beach.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
It's actually happening, Mayor, in a lot of places in the nation, that kind of premium. But
Wow.
so then, Ken, this is a very conservative estimate then
Yeah.
on your part in terms of the revenue for the city.
Yes.
All right, thanks.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Krasno? No? Thank you, Ken. Please stand by in
Thanks, Ken.
case we have any questions. I do have a number of people who signed up to speak.
Mayor, do we want to talk as a commission?
Want to talk first?
Yeah, and also I want to hear from our city attorney. He needs
Yeah,
to
we've got
get
a
some
lot of points
answers
from
also.
So
Alan.
you want me to wait for, well, I'll wait for.
I don't know. I mean, what do you all think?
Well, I want to hear, Alan has the documents or what's in front of us also.
Yeah, we have
All right,
2
so
hours.
Vice Mayor, if you want to talk first, let's go ahead.
Well, I think we do need to go through some of Alan's stuff. I do have a couple main points, not necessarily related to the financials, that
Go
I'd
ahead.
like
That's fine. Go
some
ahead.
clarification on. So let's see. I guess probably one of the Tates would probably be best to answer this. I think my passion for public space. And I've been consistent, whether it's Lockhart, One Stop, or Bahia also. And, I'm looking at this, and I remember how this project has changed a little bit and evolved. I have in my notes, about 4 acres of public space to up to about 6 acres now. When I look at the cover of Collier's, which we're all looking at now on the screen, can we get rid of questions and thank you? By any chance? Or that's embedded in there?
Can we get a
back
picture?
to the first
Can we
page,
get a picture of the proposed site plan?
which maybe is page 1.
A clean image
Page 1
without
of
the
21.
questions and thank you.
has the land I'm referring to.
Yeah, just hold on a sec. A lot of boats there.
A lot of boats. I think if we went to page 1 of 21, it would be accurate, 'cause that's what I'm looking at right now.
Well, that-
So, questions? Well, it was better when you went back, because the questions were on top of the,
Why don't you put
Water.
the first one.
you can,
Right
right
there,
there, that's
right.
fine. So I'm going to focus on this piece of land right here. Do we know about how big this green space is?
How big what is?
How big is the green space that I'm looking at?
The contiguous green space?
Yeah.
There is an answer to that. If you hear from the developer, he'll say it's 300 acres, and if you hear from the, there is I believe it's 4.6 acres, I think, was contiguous green space.
I
Mr.
think-
Lockery, do you have estimates on that?
I know like what,
Tooth acre, do you have estimates on that? Might as well take it from two
I know when I go to the airport and we look at different things, they have this little, I don't know.
Robert
They have a
Locker.
way to figure it out.
Good afternoon.
Come
Robert
on.
Locker on behalf of the tenant.
Yeah.
The overall open space landscaped area that is essentially public access, which does include the promenade as well, is about 6.14 acres. I'm not sure, Commissioner, specifically what this piece is. I may have that information. I'll look for it.
Okay, so I bet we could who would be the best person to give me that information? I mean, because we don't really have the exact site plan yet. This is kind of proposed. So I would like to know kind of exactly how big that space is. I don't know if our city staff can do it, because we don't really quite have this proposal.
The thing is, I believe it's attached to one of the exhibits where there's a bird's eye view of the whole thing.
Right, but the bird's eye view, my main concern with the space that's kind of in the middle, that we do call public space, is that I really think it's more space for the condo and hotel to use. I don't really know the amount of space that'll be public access. So we have the promenade and we have this space on the water, which I know we built this space really to accommodate the boat show. So it is lovely. My main concern is that in the comprehensive agreement, we have, whether it's special permits or special events, this space is really programmed most of the time. So my concern is it's not really open to the public. So I would really like to see this space. I was willing to allow for the residential on this property because I knew that was financially what made sense to invest in the public amenities and to make it a better experience for our public. So I was willing to kind of go along with some of these that seem a little dense or, maybe some people had some concerns about. But I really wanted in return something. And to me, that something is public access and not really kind of public access.
So Vice Mayor, in my meetings with the tenant, we did discuss that, and I'm hoping that they'll speak to that. But I know in the documents that we've seen, it talked about closing that space that you're referencing, and I agree with you. And I think it also referenced closing the promenade. And I have asked them to not close that promenade unless it's for special event permit, and also to limit that number even further for that open space. I think it said something like 6 times a month, but I want it to be no more than 4 times a month, or even less. But I agree with you. It has to be no closing of the promenade unless special event permit, and a much less number to keep that space open.
What
yes.
I'd really like to see when I look at this picture too, I see a lot of rooftop amenities, so that the buildings can have some outdoor amenities on top of the roof. I would personally, I'm going to go a little bit further, Steve, and then let's see where we can land on this. I would like it to really be available to the public 100% of the time and really not have any special events. I would prefer that you program your special events within these buildings, and then you all operate that. You don't even need to ask. You do what you want. And I think there's enough space because if you have the bird's eye view, and I know this plan isn't final because you still have to go to DRC and everything, so you can tweak it.
Well, the problem is the boat show is a special event, and they can't include that.
No, except the boat show. We'll give the boat show their 6 weeks or whatever they need, whatever they've negotiated. I agree 100. The boat show, yes. The boat show has priority to this.
All right. By the way,
all the
if you look on Exhibit 5, the first picture, I don't know if you have it on your screen or it gives you a better view of the site.
Okay, I have looked on all the little pieces that we have looked at. I just really, so my biggest concern is I'd like this open to the public 100% of the time. I'd like the special events to be somewhere else. I would probably even say, our Parks and Rec department may have some opportunities to help program this a little bit. I'm seeing, some great activities right there. So that's my biggest concern. And my second biggest concern, I need to make sure, I saw something recently, maybe the past 24 hours, that mentioned something about the boat show, their contract being terminated, their lease being terminated. And I thought we had worked through all that so that the boat show was protected for the 99 years along with us approving this. I thought their lease was protected as well. Maybe I misinterpreted that and misunderstood. I just want to make sure the boat show is protected. I think we've all said that all the whole time. And then I want to make sure the public have some access because we keep talking about how expensive all these units are and how great. So there's obviously a lot of money to be made from somebody, and the city's getting a portion, so we appreciate that. But my main priority is public access, and I just don't want land that's programmed. So I know we're not voting today, but that's really kind of what I feel. So I don't know if you're prepared to answer that. Yeah. Or think about it before we kind of get to the next phase of this conversation.
Commissioner Kenny Tate, represent the applicant or the tenant. To answer your first question on the size of those parks in the back, I do have a sketch from the boat show that they were planning on about 17,500 square foot tent on the park and the parking lot in the western portion of our property. So that's about 1.4 5 acres, 1.6 acres.
All right, so if you take away the parking lot, it's about an acre park.
So it's at least an acre, well, probably a little bit larger.
Right. So you have 16 acres to work with. It would be really great to have 1 acre available to the public.
And we have no problem with that. And you know, the only uses that we would envision, obviously, other than special functions, if we have the boat show, if there's a food and wine festival or something that, you know, the city would have to permit, or you know, the hotel may occasionally have a wedding function or a private party.
Right, well, that's the special event. So I'd like us to separate the special permit
Yeah,
versus
I
the
mean, we're not-
special event.
I think the park and the promenade almost definitely will be open almost all the time.
Well,
And the park
right.
substantially all the time.
So I like the promenade, that's great, and I do expect it to connect, starting at the Las Olas parking garage through, you know, everything, the new swimming hall of fame that that we have a P3. I hope, we plan on making it all connected, so I do want that to come to fruition. The promenade's great, but I really think we can give 1 acre of a park to the public on that spot.
I don't have a problem. We're looking at very little private use of that park. Yeah, it's not a major.
I think if I was the hotel, and I'm really not in this industry, but I would probably want a designated spot where I can do what I want without, you know, working around the boat show or the
It's not
city.
extremely convenient to the hotel either.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So in all likelihood, the one area right in front of the hotel, if someone wanted something close to the hotel.
Right.
where they could go
It looks like they've got some great rooftop spaces and some great internal spaces.
Exactly.
I just, I don't like giving up public land at all, and, but like I
Unfortunately,
said,
that horse has already left the barn. That's-
well, there is a hotel on it now, I agree with that, but if I'm going to vote for it, I want the public to get something. Right now, I've been to BMR numerous times, like y'all have, and it is just a parking lot, I get it. So the yoga, we're not doing yoga on the black asphalt, but this would be a great space for yoga on the lawn. I need the public to get something out of this. And right now, there's money, but for me, I just need a piece of public
Okay,
park.
all right.
Yes.
We're not opposed to that either. And keep in mind, the promenade will be closed for the boat show. So there are
and-
periods of time where special events take over the promenade and the park.
Yeah, I'm committed to giving the boat show everything they need. I think it's a major economic engine. It's a great asset for all of our people that live here and work here and part of the marine industry. I think we're all 100% committed to the boat show, whatever they need.
Unless I misunderstood, you mentioned something about terminating the boat show lease. There's nothing that I'm aware of as to any termination of a boat show lease.
Okay, I just want to make sure they're protected because I know they don't report to us, they report to you all. So I just need to make sure the boat show's protected. However, I get that assurance. And then I think it would be great if you could come back because I know you're going to have to ask for some height also. And I believe we've had these conversations before about kind of making things a little skinnier and taller so that we could open up more space on the bottom. You know, I've heard that argument, and to me, it kind of made sense so that we could have more green space. But I just need it to be a designated spot that isn't really subject to special events. Special permits, the public can buy a ticket and go. I'm okay with that. I think it's about once a month or so.
As Commissioner Glassman suggested, 1 or 2 times, maximum 1 or 2 times without special permission is more than acceptable.
Okay.
1 or 2 times a month is fine.
And Kenny, is this amount of greens, is this, the boat show completely fine with this? On the picture, is that enough for them?
Well,
I've heard them before, but they argue with me that it's not what they said, so I don't want to speak for them.
Okay.
That's a whole other issue.
Well, no, if we're talking about protecting the boat show,
Yeah, I mean,
we
the
gotta.
lease-
You'll have to ask them if.
Okay, no, that's fair. I'll talk to them.
Right, but it's not just that space. We're not seeing it because it's being blocked.
Right, that's
by
why we
these
got to get the whole thing.
It's all around the whole peninsula.
They have testified in prior workshops with you.
Okay.
Previously, they've said they've used the word, it's a good plan and it's a better layout, but I'll let them speak for you.
Okay, and then I've heard the word site plan. Is there a new site plan?
There is the sketch that you've seen in prior workshops.
Conceptual.
Which is being attached to this lease.
Okay.
And our proposal, or our contemplation is, as soon as this lease is done, within a 24-month period, we will prepare the complete application to submit to your entire DRC process to get this. This is only a lease negotiation. We have to still go through the entire site plan process.
Okay. And does the lease require you to build the new site plan?
It's attached to the lease. The lease describes the 350 branded units. It describes the 60 hotel units. It describes the 88,000 square feet of commercial space. So that's all described in the current proposed lease.
So does
Commissioner,
it require?
Commissioner, actually, this is part of why we have to go through the documents, because
No.
as written, it does not say that.
It does
So-
not.
Right,
Okay.
so it's fine to change it to that, but right now, including
gotta
with the special
work on
functions and
that.
things, so these are some of the things we need to go
Okay.
through to get that specificity.
To get that improved. Okay. Great. Thank you.
And
That's-
Kenny, do you
that's
really,
great.
do you need 24 months to put that together? That can't be done in a year and a half, 18 months?
Maybe there's no reason for us not to push this as fast as we can. We have a hot real estate market right now, and
Yes.
time is hurting both sides, because the quicker we can build it, the quicker you can get your big upfront fee. So that's just an outside date. We think we can do it quicker, but yeah.
Understood.
Unfortunately, I can't control architects. I can't control land planners. I can't control all the various subcontractors that we're going to have to hire to complete this process. But we should be able to complete in significantly, hopefully within 1 year. But I wouldn't contractually commit to that, knowing that it's beyond my control.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, just a question for you as we're thinking about.
Wait, Vice Mayor, do you have any other questions?
I probably have 10 different things, but I know Alan has 40 of them outlined, so we can kind of go through those together. But that's my main concern, that I really have to have that.
Okay, all right.
Yep, Ben?
All right.
Yeah, just a question for Vice Mayor. Just as we're thinking about this, as we're thinking about One Stop. So as you think about green space, so I'm with you on wanting the public access and so forth. And so it sounds like comfort level with some development and having a development on public land, but as long as we have some green space, then openness to that. Is that
Right, but it gets
generally
a
how you
little
feel?
tricky when we say access, because
Right.
when it's programmed by the person who has built that space,
Right.
then can you really go?
Right.
Or is it always just activated the whole time and you really don't have access to it?
Okay.
So that's where I get concerned about this, seeing that they can have a lot of special events, then it really isn't open to the public.
Right. Okay, good. So it's the idea of, hey, you're comfortable with some development on public land as long as there's some unfettered public access to land.
Kind of guaranteed. I mean,
Yeah.
we'll have the one-stop conversation yesterday. I've said numerous times, I actually kind of like it. I just
Yeah.
probably don't like it on public land, but, but yes, this, I think if we are going to give this, approve this, there needs to be a benefit for the public.
Right. Okay.
And I think that's could be the benefit.
Okay. All right, great. And then, Mayor, can I talk to the boat show folks?
Sure, go ahead.
Please. Great. So I have some questions for the boat show, just for feedback on this.
How many you got?
About 20.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Stephanie Toothaker on behalf of Informa and the boat show parties. I'm not the only person that's here on behalf of the boat show, but I thought I'd see if I can respond to your questions.
Okay, thanks. So one, I got an email about there's some litigation now going between who? What's the
I'm
story?
going to defer that one.
Okay. And then my next question is going to be, just so I understand that, and then I don't know how that impacts what you all are able to talk about here, and I just don't know how this all
Well, let
works.
me start by saying, while
Yeah.
Sigrid's coming up to the podium, we appreciate the opportunity to be here, the boat show parties together, appreciate the opportunity to be here and to speak on behalf of the boat show. And as you know, this is the only forum that we are allowed to speak to you in, because we're in a public hearing, and that has been challenging for us. One of the reasons that we're pleased to be able to stand here before you this afternoon, and Danielle DeVito Hurley is also here with Gunster Yoakley Law Firm and has been negotiating the lease terms, is that we've asked for protections in the lease and in the other documents related to the lease, and I'm not the expert on that, but Danielle is. And we've asked for protections and been told that those protections would be provided, but they do not yet exist. And that has been our concern, that, that we've received information that protections that we've asked for are going to be forthcoming, but when the documents became public, they are not there. So the boat show parties do not feel, as of today, where we sit today, that those protections are built into those documents. And I'm going to stop there and let Ms. McCauley speak to you about your first question.
Okay, and but for that, again, I'm not clear on who all talks with who, but so you've been talking with the applicant about the protections you'd like? Is that what happens, or?
Correct. As a group, we all met. Danielle DeVito Hurley, as I said, is the person that's negotiating. She's a real estate lawyer, and this is her expertise.
Okay.
We have provided language and terminology to the applicant, and none of those protections yet have been written.
Okay, so they aren't.
Commissioner, if I could just elaborate on that.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they're not included, because we needed a static set of documents for me to be able to meet with you individually. We all each met anywhere from 2 to 2.5 hours together. The boat show folks and Bahia Mar began their negotiations about the master declaration with regards to the boat show and everything else. We purposely stayed out of that. So to the extent that any changes are suggested to Bahia Mar and the city have not exchanged anything or changed anything since December, because we needed that static.
Right.
Because otherwise everything changes every week, and then I can't keep up with all 5 of you. So the reason it's not in there is intentional, because we wanted a baseline of agreements to discuss with you, and to the extent that there's any changes they may have agreed to with the boat show folks, it can obviously be discussed and added to the documents, but it wouldn't be reflected in the documents you have before you.
And
That makes sense.
respect that. I respect that. Obviously, we respect that.
Yeah.
But if this is scheduled for a vote in 2 weeks, obviously you can understand where our concern comes from, that
Right.
none of the language that we have asked for yet exists.
But Alan, you're aware of the language that they're asking for.
Not really, because I've purposely stayed out of those negotiations.
Yeah.
So you don't know. So
I'm dealing with our tenant. They're not a party to, we're not in privity with the boat show. So I'm only in privity with the tenant.
So you heard what
What do you mean? What do you mean when you say that?
I'm sorry?
What do you mean?
Meaning I don't have an agreement with the boat show. We don't have an agreement together related to this property necessarily. So I'm dealing directly with the Tates and their group, because they're our tenant, we're the lessor, they're the lessee. So that's who I need to be negotiating with.
So the other piece shouldn't be negotiated here. What are you saying?
I shouldn't be negotiating with the boat show folks. I don't have a contract with them, and I'm not going to have a contract with them. Okay. I'm only going to have a contract with.
Right, so sequentially what needs to happen is the applicant.
I just want to understand what you guys brought to light here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you're saying you should be negotiating with the Tates,
Yes,
not the boat show.
right.
And why are we negotiating with the boat show? Why are we having this conversation?
Because the commissioner wants to make sure that the integrity of the agreement between the boat show and Ron Bahia Mar is not going to be affected by any agreement we enter into, and that they'll continue to have the relationship with the lessor, in this case Ron Bahia Mar, in perpetuity for so long as the 99-year lease continues.
Right. There were some issues.
So who answers that question?
What's that?
Who answers the question that you just? I'm just trying to understand something here. I'm confused.
That would be an agreement between Bahia Mar and the boat show.
Yeah, I'm asking the
We
boat
don't have
show.
a say in that.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they have a separate agreement. So to the vice mayor's point earlier, they have a lease together, right?
Right.
We're not party to that.
Okay.
So whether there's a breach of that lease, whether that lease terminates, what the conditions are, we have nothing to do with it.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
But Alan, at one point in time, do we make sure, because we want to protect the boat show, especially since the condominiums came into play, other issues came into play.
Correct.
So there has to be language that protects the boat show with regards to the documents that will go out to the purchasers of the condos. So at some point in time, will all of that kind of language be in our master declaration?
Well, there's already a substantial amount of language dealing with the boat show in the master lease, the phase lease, as well as the master declaration. There's at least to the city's satisfaction. Now, to the extent that the boat show folks want more things, they have to agree with Bahia Mar on that, because that, again, it's not an agreement with us. So Unless BMR agrees with the boat show to add additional language, I can't put it in there.
I
That's
understand,
not
but
me.
you feel in the documents so far that you've shared with us that those protections are there from our perspective.
From our perspective, yes, but I can't speak for the boat show.
Okay, so then it's up to the boat show and the tenant to work out whatever it is that Ms. Toothaker is saying they still need.
Right. And then BMR can come to us and say, okay, we've agreed with the boat show to add this particular language, and then if we have no objection to it, which I don't think we would, then we would add that to the agreement.
Right, and
But
so from
I can't do that without BMR.
So can someone from can someone on the tenant side tell us if those conversations are going to happen to the satisfaction of both parties?
That's for a judge to decide.
Well, what Ms. Toothaker, no, I'm talking about the language that Ms. Toothaker mentioned has not yet appeared in
Right,
documents. So is that going to be talked and
We,
discussed with each other?
as the city attorney has mentioned, we included a lot of language to protect the boat show. Some of which was required per our lease with the boat show. We've included that. The boat show has asked for some additional language which they feel protects them even more. This morning, our attorney met with Danielle this morning, and I believe they've worked out I believe I've heard from our side that they agreed on what's to go. But you're getting into the minutia. Like, for instance, what we propose is as long as the lease was in good standing, they're entitled to certain rates. They want us to change it as long as it's not in default after any default cure period. So it's minutia thing. The protections are there. They just want a little bit more protection so that they don't have to deal with the condo association later on, which we fully understand. And we've agreed with them not to sell any of the parcels to the condo association so they don't become their landlord.
Right, because it is of the utmost importance that we make sure that they're protected.
We've been a good landlord of the boat show from day one, and we hope to continue to be for the next however long we have. Our current lease has another 30 plus 10 years. They previously had asked for their lease to coincide with our lease with you. We offered that to them, and then they rejected it after the fact. So
I understand. So Alan, historically, previous commissions, have they gotten involved with the agreements between the boat show and the tenant, or have the city just stayed out of that?
Not to my knowledge, but I don't know that we would get involved. I mean, I know the previous commission, there was some pressure perhaps added that they come to an agreement at some point. But to the extent we're not a party to it, so there's only so much the city can do, not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
All right, but let me just bring closure to this. Stephanie, do you have litigation counsel with you? You want to step up to the podium? So I read your lawsuit, and it seems that there are certain items that you feel that you want to be able to discuss with members of the commission, that you feel your hands are tied. Do you want to discuss them now? What is it that you feel you haven't gotten out of the arrangement with Ron Mahiamar that you wish to discuss? Because now you can discuss it.
Sure. Thank you for allowing me to address that. Just to bring the whole commission up to speed, what is at issue here is a lawsuit that we filed on behalf of our clients, the boat show parties. The city is named as a nominal defendant only because you hold the land against BHMR, and that is based, and it's called a declaratory judgment action. Basically, what that asks for is for us to be able to speak freely with the commission. We are currently under a gag order in the lease agreement, the 2017 lease agreement, which prevents the parties that work with the boat show from having free discussions with the city commission as you would in this format, leading up to what would ultimately be a vote, so that you're well educated, so that you understand the public issues, what's not being said behind closed doors. So it's a very full and frank discussion. That has not happened to date, and that's a problem.
Well,
not only for
I
the
get
boat
that,
show,
but I get that. But are you in a position right now to tell us what those points of view are that you wish to resolve, that you want to be able to publicly discuss with us? Because the floor is yours.
Sure. No, I appreciate that so much. I mean, there are obviously a number of issues, and I do have counsel here with me to help me address those issues. What I would like to say, though, that is very important is with respect to that gag order, that, as you know, there are meetings that go on in advance of these things where you can have a private audience that's different than other circumstances. And what's also happened here is there's been information pushed out to the public by form of emails, mailers to thousands and thousands of public members of Fort Lauderdale that are against the interest of the boat show that they have not been able to correct because of the gag order. So
Right.
there's been material misinformation pushed out that's problematic on a number of levels.
Okay, so again, I ask you, if maybe you're not the one to answer this, but who in your team can use this platform right now? Forget the gag. You're ungagged right now. Okay, took off the gag. Tell us what is it that the boat show is looking for?
Mayor, if I could, but so I think that's a great question and love to hear that. But in addition, and we've talked about this many times, I think it'd be helpful as this process continues for us to be able to talk freely with the boat show as individuals.
I get that.
Don't we? Do we all? I mean, I think most of us agree with that.
And
so can we ask?
Is asserting their
Right. Can we ask them to allow us to have conversations so we can come to successful resolution?
I agree with you.
For this.
But they have not
Can-
yet to date permitted
Okay.
that.
So applicant, can someone from the applicant stand and see if, can we? We'd like to be able to talk with them freely just as we can talk. Is that possible?
Commissioner, Mayor, this is
Yeah.
Jimmy Tate again for representing the BMR. There's a lot of history here, so it's not as black and white as you're making it out to be, and I appreciate the fact that you're new to the game, but this relationship has had issues over the years and subject since they brought up the lawsuit. There is no gag order. There's no gag order anywhere in the boat show lease, and the entire commission has a copy of the boat show lease. What they're referring to is paragraph 20 of the boat show lease, which is an indemnity agreement that they forced us to sign that says we will not sue them for tortious interference, bad faith dealing, or other egregious actions they took during the last process in 2017. As a condition for us to sign that provision, that indemnity, we said we don't want any more backdoor meetings where you can influence without us knowing what you're saying with the commission. So you need to agree to speak publicly, and you can speak freely at any public hearing, or if you would like, and we've told their attorneys multiple times, if you want to meet with the commissioner, just invite us to be in the room. Speak freely. We never put a gag on her. We've never asked them what to say or what not to say. I don't want to say much more than that because there's litigation, but suffice to say, you're getting part of the story, not all the story, and our attorneys will be responding to the lawsuit. Thank you. And we have not terminated their lease. Thank you.
Okay, so, hold on. So, okay, thanks. So,
So if you want me to continue, what I would like to
I was
say
just
is
going to ask a question. Go ahead.
for a lease agreement between us as your tenant and you as our landlord. We are in privity with you, you are in privity with us. We have a separate lease agreement which has nothing to do with our lease agreement with the city, which we are the landlord and the boat show parties are a tenant. The city is not in privity with that agreement. And every time you bring it up, Commissioner, you bring the city into the middle of this. Okay?
Sorry.
And I'm just telling you, it's a complicated issue, and we're trying to deal with them professionally and properly and fair and reasonably. But we cannot allow the city commission to continuously interfere with our ability to be a good landlord with our tenant and their ability to have certain rights, which they agreed to in their 2017 lease agreement. And we're not going to allow this to be a platform for them to renegotiate the terms and conditions of their 2017 lease agreement, which, by the way, is part of the reason there was a little discord going on, because we've agreed to everything we've asked them. They've told us they had purported concerns. Purported concern number one is that future home runners were going to try to disrupt and interfere and actually terminate their boat show lease. Purported concern number two, future associations were going to try to take actions to interfere with their ability to perform their boat show in accordance with the lease. We incorporated language to protect them against that. They then said they wanted us to allow their lease to continue coterminous with our lease. We gave them an option for that. They didn't like the option we gave them. We've done everything we can to help them get comfortable with regard to this lease. The commission's asked us to go ahead and go forward to work with them, with our land planners and their land planners, to come up with a site plan. We spent 7 to 8 months with their land planners and our land planners, coming up with a site plan at a great compromise and a lot of money to us to accommodate all their concerns. We've increased the boat show space from the 2017 plan by over 75,000 square feet for what we're legally obligated to give them from a net leasable basis. We've increased their gross square footage of area. We've taken them out of a garage, which was mostly on the second floor, and gave them open, contiguous waterfront space. We have letters from their council stating that they accept the proposed site plan, and they appreciate our cooperation and are happy that we got to we resolved those issues. We have emails from their council that said that they will support our lease agreement with the city so that we can effect this new plan. What they're trying to do is get the city to interfere with the process so that they can once again use the city as a strong arm to force us to renegotiate the terms and conditions of a 2017 boat show lease, which we had a proverbial gun to our head by the prior commission to sign. Don't do it. That's all I'm saying. Please. Let the process play itself out. We will respond to their lawsuit. We're here before you as your tenant, you as our landlord. They are not a party to that part of the conversation. Thank you.
So don't do what? You're upset
I'm asking you to
with us
please stop interfering with our ability to work with our tenant, you as our landlord, we as your tenant. We are their landlord, they are our tenant.
Okay, and
in
how are
neither
we?
scenario are they a party to our agreement with you, and neither scenario are you a party to our agreement with them.
Right, and how are we interfering?
Every time you bring up the boat show
Commissioner, if I
as
can-
part of our lease negotiations with the city, Commissioner.
If I can intercede, just one, we're now in a posture where there is a lawsuit. To Mr. Tate's point, we do not want the city, we do not want in a position where we are interfering, where we're either putting pressure or trying to influence a change to the actual agreement. If we have them change the language to permit private discussions with the commission, that could constitute that, and we should stay away from that. We shouldn't be involved.
Okay, great. So, Alan, are you saying we shouldn't talk about the boat show as a commission? Is that
You can here in the setting, but
Okay.
they have an agreement that they need to live, they have obligations to each other.
Great.
We can't change that and we can't influence that.
Okay.
So they need to govern themselves between each other. We can't get involved. So if we can talk about it here, everybody is giving each other permission to talk about it here. But to the extent we want to do it outside the confines of what they've agreed to,
Okay.
we can't really influence that. That's between them.
So what I'm hearing you say is we're not interfering when we're talking about it here.
No, if you're talking about it here in the open, it's that they've admitted that there's no.
But I think
Right. What Barry was saying, which I thought I said before, is we've given them permission. In fact, the boat show lease gives them permission to speak openly and freely at any commission hearing, at any public hearing. And they've had these opportunities. In fact, they've spoken before you guys before, openly and freely, with no what they call a gag order. There is no gag order.
All right, so that's why I said to them, Commissioner, that's why I said, tell us what it is that you've been wanting to say in private. Tell us now in public what's on the agenda so we can address those items.
But and just to be clear, it sounds like what I'm hearing is we're not interfering by talking about it here.
No, not here. The
Are you
issue.
feeling like we're interfering, Jimmy? I just felt like he was feeling like by talking about this, or Barry. Yeah.
Barry Summerstein,
Yeah.
nice to see you,
Yeah,
Ben. The answer is very clear. The lease, our lease with the boat show, and
Yeah.
we've said this, I've said it before in previous.
If you want to say it again in the microphone.
I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it again, just so that everybody understands. The boat show has every right, and we've asked. They've spoken to you at these meetings, and we have no issue with what they want to say.
Okay.
As it relates to meeting privately,
Yeah.
all we've said to them is you can meet outside of public hearings.
Yeah.
We just want to be present to hear what's being said. We're not stopping them from meeting privately. We've said that to you before. We're saying it again now. Anytime they want to meet with you, just let us know. We'll be happy to listen so that we make sure that you're getting the correct information, because we've had problems in our private agreement with them. We've had problems with what they've been saying, and we just want to be able to know what they're saying so that we know if it's accurate or not, so we can respond to it. It's hard to respond to an unknown. So there is no quote, gag order. They have been told, you have been told previously that if we're present at the meeting, they can meet outside of public meetings with you.
Okay, great.
Is that clear?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's great.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands. And quite frankly, we would very much like to hear from the boat show. There's two things I think need to be understood, okay? And if I'm saying something improper, I apologize. We're here today to talk about an amendment to the master lease. That's what we're asking for. As part of that process, we have been asked to improve the spacing for the boat show, which we have been agreeing to do. But that is not what we're here to talk about, nor are you here to approve, because to amend the site plan is a governmental process. As a landlord, you can say, yeah, we like this space better, and we're telling you we're willing to go forward and try and amend the plan based on what we believe has been said here and privately with us that the boat show would prefer to have. And if that's not the case, I would love to hear the boat show tell you that they don't like this plan better. But as it relates to...
Yeah, go ahead.
But as it relates to what we're asking for, this is a amendment to lease question, not a site plan approval question. In any event, I don't want to...
Right. Well, we don't even have a site plan though, right? We don't even have a site plan, right?
Well...
So it wouldn't be... We
have a proposed site plan.
Have a proposed plan that would be the basis for going forward later to you for a plan that improves the public space and does the things that we're talking about.
And it's
Where's the site plan?
It's an exhibit to the amendment to the master lease, and that's why we're discussing the site plan.
Yeah, so it's connected to what we're talking about.
It's an exhibit.
Right.
It's an exhibit. So it's all relevant.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you look at the CAM and you look at the item that's in front of us today, we're supposed to be discussing with the city attorney the master lease agreement, the phase lease agreement, the amended and restated declaration of covenants and restrictions of the Bahia Mar Master Association proposed and submitted by Bahia Mar. And then it says the city attorney will lead a discussion regarding these documents. Because we as a commission requested that these documents come before us today. So are we going to get to that at all?
Well, we are, but and the financial portion of that was what the purpose of today's discussion was. But as it happens, the protections of the boat show are also incorporated in this document, and that's why it's relevant to hear from the boat show folks what their feelings are, where they feel that they're not being protected by the master lease. And again, that's why I invite them to come to the podium. We're in the public forum. We're not violating any gag orders. Tell us, what is the problem?
Okay.
Hi, this is Danielle DeVito Hurley with Gunster Yoakley.
I can't hear a word you're saying.
Oh, sorry. Is this better?
Yes, much
This
better.
is Danielle DeVito Hurley with Gunster Yoakley. I represent the boat show. I don't normally do this. I'm a real estate transactional attorney. I've been dealing with Barry and his folks, so I apologize if I don't have the same poise as some of my colleagues. We certainly acknowledge that we're not in privity with the city, but I think the other competing interest is how important the boat show is, both to the
What
city.
are the issues?
Well, I'm getting there. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay.
And
We're running out of time. That's why I'm
no, I totally understand.
okay.
When we talk about the site plan and when we have talked about it in prior meetings, it's always kind of focused on square footage, which overlooks a very important issue for the boat show, which was always the people that were going to be occupying these beautiful buildings and their ability to impede the boat show in the future. So and that was a conversation that we had had with the boat show, and one of the ways that they tried to assuage our concerns was to propose a master declaration and other documents. So although we're not a party to it, there's protections that were promised to us in that document. One of the protections with it was that our lessor would never be an association. You can imagine what a disaster that would be for a $1.3 billion event. And so in the latest draft of the master declaration that was put on the city agenda, it did say that, but it also said it could have been amended or terminated without the boat show's consent, which means there's really not any protection. So we've been trying to work through these issues, but we do have issues beyond just kind of the square footage of the site. We have issues with how we're going to move in and out of this site. We're going to need more time to do that. We have issues with where people are going to park. How are we going to redevelop the infrastructure? You know, are we going to get any rent reduction to kind of accommodate the increased costs that we have? So it's a bit of a bundle of packages, and you're right, we're not in privity, but we do want to be part of this conversation, because at the end of the day, I think we want this development. Obviously, it's beautiful, it's to the benefit. We just want to make sure that we're still here. That's pretty much what we've been asking for. So in prior drafts of the master deck, I have sent it over, and we've gotten pretty much no responses. Today, Barry and I did have a conversation. You know, hopefully we'll get there. We have to see it. We need to review the document. But there are things that the boat show needs with respect to the new development that kind of go beyond what we already have been, provided.
So when I read the agreement, I think there's specific language in both the master lease and the master declaration where the boat show's existence is insulated from any changes that could be made. Are you in agreement with that?
So we're not a party to the master lease. In the master declaration.
No, you're not a party, but I'm just saying, have you seen any of these documents?
I've seen all of the documents.
Okay.
But the concern I have is those documents can be changed the day after they're signed. The only document I'm able to get protections in is the master association. So really, in the memo that I sent over with our open issues, the main prevailing point is if there's provisions in that document that benefit the boat show, don't change them without the boat show's consent.
But section 21.3, I'm sorry, I'm confused, because in section 21.3 of the master declaration, no changes could be made regarding the boat show without the boat show's consent.
No, I think it refers specifically to section 2.11 of the master declaration.
No, if you look at 21.3.
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's what it says in 21.3. And then our suggestions to you, if we get there, would be to add the city to that as well. So that would add another layer of it, rather than just the boat show's consent. The city's consent would be required as well, But
21.3 didn't address all of the provisions of the master association that benefit the boat show.
we must be reading it differently.
We could be. Well, we're not this is kind of part of the issue. We're not at the table to have these conversations to make sure these provisions are where they're supposed to be.
I know, but I need to negotiate with my tenant. That's part of the problem. I can't have third parties negotiate.
Right, So Barry, is any feedback around the concerns they're having? Is this stuff you're working on and are going to get to win, or you disagree with, or anything you can get feedback?
I don't know if this is the forum to do that, because it's, there's a lot of issues.
Yeah.
I personally believe that we have addressed the concerns that were raised by Danielle.
Okay.
The overriding issue that I think everybody needs to understand is our commitment to provide these additional provisions was made in order to give the boat show additional comfort that if they perform and don't default under their lease, they will be able to operate without interference. Their lease is prior to the master declaration. Whatever is in that master declaration is subordinate to what's in the boat show lease. So it's irrelevant, actually, because as long as they perform under the boat show lease, what's in the master declaration is subordinate. They have those rights. I have sat with Danielle, and I think she would acknowledge it. I think we're very close. There's some wording issues, but conceptually, that if they perform having in the documents the declaration other than the memorandum, which gives them the right already, all of the rest of this is optics to help them, that will give protective language sufficient to do what is needed. That's my personal opinion. There's some slight wording issues, which I think we can work on, but generally stated, I don't think we're in disagreement. What needs to be understood here, and I don't want to digress because we are limited in time, is to have Danielle tell you, other than the issues of the disclosure, that the intent is, as long as the boat show is performing and is here. They're not going to be disturbed at that site, okay, which is clear. That what is their concern with the balance of what we're asking for, okay? So I would ask Danielle to address that
Great.
issue. There's
Yeah,
other
great.
issues, I think, will work its way out.
Okay, great. Danielle.
Just to briefly respond, I think the master declaration is an optical document more than anything, because what's going to happen is you're going to have people buy into these units. They're not going to review anything they sign. I mean, that's the reality of it. We all know that. And then they're going to start either litigation or they're going to start calling their city commissioners. And I know this because when I've been involved in other projects, that's exactly what happened. So what we're trying to do in the master deck optically is try to preclude as much of that as we can. We probably won't preclude it all. It's going to be a nightmare for the boat show. At the end of the day, that's okay. We'll have to deal with it. Some of the other issues that Barry asked that we raise is it's going to be harder for us to move in and move out of the site in the time, in the time frames that we have now. There's a lot more buildings there. The flow of traffic is going to be going one way. There's a lot, I can't speak operationally, but there's a lot involved in having to set up this show.
Yeah.
We did ask for an extension of our term for the boat show lease. We thought it was important. The only adjustment we made is we wanted it to be an option and not an automatic. I think we're probably in agreement on that. We need to deal with where the utilities are going to be relocated. We asked for a rent reduction because we think our rent is out of whack, frankly, in comparison with the rent, that gets paid for the overall land when we're there for a month. We also would like, some relief to try to mitigate some of the costs that we're going to have in terms of this new development and how we move in and out of that. We asked for some relief on advertising because we've had some issues in prior years where people have advertised on the property kind of directly contrary to the show and in competition to the show. We sent a letter. We had 13 issues in it. We've sat and met. We haven't made very much progress on that. The master declaration is one of those 13 issues. We can go through each one. I'm happy to do that. We're just trying to be part of the dialogue to make sure that this boat show has the continued success that everybody would hope and would want for the city.
And so, Mayor, that's just my hope and concern is just not only the boat show just has, legal, protection just to continue to operate, but then just this operational piece and making sure that we can keep the boat show here in the city of Fort Lauderdale in perpetuity. And that's just my concern. And I'm sure we can get there, but that's what I'm worried about.
Okay, and
Can I make a comment?
I think those concerns were, we all agree with you on that, but I think that's been part of the conversation from day one.
Right, but they're not in agreement.
No, but
very.
the
they're
thing
not
is,
close.
they are in the agreements. The issues about how much rent they're paying, square foot, that's between them, and that has nothing to do with the documents in front of you today.
Sure.
But to the extent the people being able to sue, it stays in there. It states in there. You take it subject to the boat show. You can't sue. You can't deem that it's a nuisance. You can't do any of that. Now, people may not read it and go ahead and sue, but that putting additional language, if you can put additional language in there, but if they're not going to read it, it's not going to help you. So we feel there's enough in there. Again, we can go through it. They're long provisions, but that we can control with Bahia Mar. But to the extent that they have particular issues with Bahia Mar, they're going to have to work that out together and then bring it to us.
Agreed. I agree. And that's what we talked about earlier and that's my concern is just, and I know, again, we're not in privity, but that's the concern. We want the boat show to stay. And so.
But can I make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, this is a public forum, right?
Correct.
And they can talk about these agreements that they won't talk about outside of here. So we've heard from Danielle, am I correct?
Correct.
So can someone from the landlord for the boat show respond to Danielle's ask or request? And no way am I negotiating. I just want them to be able to talk while they're sitting here and there's no...
Commissioner Jimmy Tate representing the Bahia Mar. Just quickly again, as your city attorney stated on the record, we believe we have addressed their purported concerns about future homeowners and future associations having the ability or legal ability to interfere with their boat show. As our attorneys told you, their boat show which is prior to any future declarations as a recorded instrument. They already have a negotiated boat show lease, which is recorded with the property, and that gives them all of their protections. Some of the things they're bringing up here is just pure renegotiation of something that's already been negotiated in the 2017 lease. For example, they're talking about additional costs by moving infrastructure. They were going to have to cover those costs when we moved them in the 2017 plan versus where they're at today. They talk about access and stable, mobilization and demobilization. The 2017 plan that they agreed to has no on-site available property for them to mobilize. It all has to be done off-site. The plan we're proposing to them has 7.3 acres of open contiguous space, very similar to what they have today. So without belaboring the point, they're trying to use the city and use this opportunity as a platform to renegotiate the boat show lease from 2017. The fact that they want marketing assistance, that's a term and condition with our boat show. The fact that they want reduced to rent, they knew we were going to have 10 years of construction with the old boat show, with the old site plan that they approved, and they knew it was going to disrupt their show. They didn't ask for anything back then. Why are they asking for it now? Why? Because they feel they can. Additionally, with regard to their utilities, they put in some utilities based upon this show. They know they have to move the utilities based upon the 2017 plan. So this is just all conjecture. And again, it's between us and them, and don't fall victim of them trying to get you involved in their lease negotiating with us. Everything dealing with the master declaration, protecting them against future homeowners interference, future association interference, we've agreed to. We've agreed to change the nomenclature with regard to whether they're in good standing or a default. We agreed to the language regarding that. As long as we're not going to take away their rights unless they're in default and they fail to cure. And if they fail to cure and they're in default, they shouldn't have any rights. That's the type of stuff we're dealing with them on. But we've agreed, and our attorneys and their attorneys, with regard to their true purported concerns for the master declaration, have been addressed and will continue to try to address them in good faith.
Thank you for responding.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
So this is just one point. When we were renegotiating the lease, or at least negotiating the new lease.
Speak up a little bit, please.
When we were negotiating the new lease, we were contractually obligated to agree to the 2017 plan to keep the boat show lease in effect, or it'd be gone. So there are issues. I think Jimmy's exactly right. There are issues in that site plan that we had to deal with to get the boat show to continue. We're not in that same position now. We're trying to approve a new site plan. We're trying to just make sure that this boat show can continue to be economically viable and successful in the long term. So I won't take any more of your time unless you have any questions for me, but just wanted to make that distinction.
Well,
Okay, thank
I have
you.
just a couple points. Do you feel like you're being protected with the language that's in place now from the condo associations interfering with you?
Not in the current draft of the association document, no. Barry and I met earlier while this meeting was starting, and we've come to, I think, possibly some agreements. I have to see it. I don't know. I'd asked for things in the last two drafts that I didn't get. I think I'm now potentially going to get them.
Okay, so you and Barry are going to work on that because
We're gonna
that's
try to work
important.
on
And
that.
I think we've talked about that along. And you feel like you're protected with the default language about your lease not being terminated and all that. You feel like the language is correct and it protects you?
At the end of the day, the boat show is going to be involved in litigation. That's the reality of it, regardless of what these documents say. I represented Arvida for years. Every deed had a acknowledgement that you couldn't say demolition was a nuisance. Arvida got sued all the time for demolition as a nuisance. I mean, that's the reality of it. So we're just trying to put in place the best optimal situation we can be in. That's what we're trying to do. We understand our leases there prior, but you're going to have people that are going to come in here, and it doesn't matter what those documents say. They're going to be calling each one of you screaming. They're going to be
Right.
calling us.
But, yeah, according to the language that's being presented to us today, you feel like your lease is being protected and you are not in jeopardy of being terminated.
I'm not sure where the termination comment came
Well,
from earlier.
your lease can be terminated if you're in default or, all the things.
Of course, yeah. No, absolutely. We don't have an issue with that. What we
Okay.
were trying to do is basically keep our lease between the lessor and us, and not have an association be able to step in and try to claim we defaulted, and then be able to give up all of the protections. That was the conversation. So absolutely, if the boat show defaults and it doesn't cure its default,
Right.
the lessor has remedies, and we'll deal with that. That's not going to
So you
happen.
agree with that then from the vote? Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? We'll go on to public comment.
Mayor, can we get into the documents with the city attorney before we go on to public comment? I mean, I don't understand why we're not dealing with anything we're supposed to be dealing with.
That's what I thought we were doing.
Huh?
If you have any questions with regard to the documents, go ahead.
Well, no, I don't. No, it's not that I have questions about the documents. The city attorney obviously gave us this very detailed memorandum. He has questions about the documents and he needs to get direction from us. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm.
No, that's correct. That was my intention, because if we're going to finalize these documents for a vote, especially on April 5th, we need some guidance.
Yes, I mean, I remember at the last meeting, Vice Mayor laid out a timetable that we all agreed on, that we were coming together today to review these documents today for then an April 5th moving forward. I mean, that's what I remember from our last meeting.
So, Alan?
Yeah, 45.
I will go through it as fast as I can and as
Take your
painless
time,
as I
take
can.
your time.
Well, we have limited time, so.
Well,
So we'll start with the master lease, and again, let me preface it by, as we all met, individually, we have a master lease, we have a proposed phase lease, and then obviously the master declaration. The master lease essentially is a new lease. It doesn't replace, it replaces the existing lease. It's not an amended or restated. So this would be a brand new lease. A lot of the language that is contained in those voluminous documents is very standard language in any sort of complex lease, so I'm not going to belabor those sections. What I wanted to do is identify some of the business terms. Let me also state that from a legal standpoint, there are no illegalities or irregularities within the document from a legal standpoint. They're commercially reasonable provisions. Now, I think the attorneys will sit and do some tweaking without necessarily needing your involvement. For example, I'm going to tweak the insurance language a little bit. You don't need to get involved with that. So these are the business issues that I think folks have raised and we've discussed that merits some discussion. The first issue deals with Article 3 in the master lease, which is the completion date. We heard today some different varying timeframes as to the completion date. Here it talks about the earlier of the date of the final certificate of occupancy or the 12th anniversary of the start date. So we've got, the numbers are a little different there, so we may want to get some commitment as to what the actual completion date is going to be or what is projected to be for the improvements. It also seems that this provision is tied into solely their ability to renew the second 50-year term. So we'll need some clarity from that, whether 12 years is sufficient. Because again, as we talk a little further and as we talk privately, there's some other provisions that say there's no phasing timeline or anything else. So it's kind of an open book. So you probably want to have some commitment there with regards to commencement and precisely, what that ties into and whether it does allow them to go ahead and kickstart a request for the second 50 years.
Well, Alan, let me ask you, it's by law, there has to be a certain number of years in place on a ground lease to qualify to become a condominium.
They need a clean 50 years for each building, for each condo.
Correct.
Right.
So if the fifth condo building is built 10 years from now, it couldn't possibly be built until there's a renewal of the lease.
No, because that's going to be taken care of with the phase lease. That's why your phase leases are going to be subtracted from your master lease. So you're going to, instead of having, as we have for the longest time, one lease for this property, you're going to end up with 5-6 leases on this property.
So it's a separate lease for each condominium association.
Correct, and they're going to get a clean 50, and those are the phase leases that we talked about.
Okay, so what we're talking about today is how long are we going to agree that it's going to take for them to do a complete build-out?
Right, exactly. So I've heard 5-6 years. I've heard different things. To the extent that that's a commitment, or at least close enough to a commitment, that's something we want to memorialize in the agreement. Because right now it's a bit open. They can have up to 12 years to do that. And again, that may just be, again, this is written in a manner where it allows them to ask for the second 50 years after that 12th year or when they get the CO. So we need some clarity on that.
So it's 12 years from which date?
From the start date.
What is that? What's the start date?
Well, the start date is defined. That would be start date shall mean the date after the commencement commencement date, which is the date of commencement of construction of the first to occur of the first residential building or the new hotel on the Bahia Mar complex as contemplated by the site plan after the governmental approvals have been obtained for such improvements. So we're looking at hotel or the first residential, so that presumably wouldn't include the Marina Village.
So as soon as the first shovel goes in the ground, that's
For the hotel or residential building,
that's the start date.
that would be the start date.
It'll be 12 years from that point.
And I don't think they would necessarily contemplate taking 12 years to do it, but I don't know. That's something we'd need to clarify.
Well, so are we, Alan, as you're going over each of these issues, do you want us to collectively give you our feedback, or are you just sharing these and then?
Well, in something here, I mean, unless you all have an issue with this, or, I mean, our recommendation would be have some clarity on this. Obviously, you're the ones that are going to be agreeing to these three very large, complex documents. So we're trying to raise these issues. So if you have no questions, we may, if you want clarity from the applicant as to when they're going to get started, when they plan on finishing, and maybe get some commitments there that would protect you. Because if, for example, we enter into the master lease, they're like, okay, see you in 12 years, and we'll start then we don't want that.
Okay.
So you want that commitment.
Okay. And 12-year. So what? Right. The suggested document right now says 12 years.
That's what they've proposed.
Okay. And define completion.
Completion is basically obtaining CO.
Of what?
Of the
Well, it depends which agreement you're talking about. So if you're talking about
Whatever you're talking about.
Well, the master lease would be exactly, that's what we need from them. The CO from what? Is it all the improvements? Because that's significant. If it's
Okay.
all the improvements, so maybe, I don't know if somebody from the applicant can stand up and give us some guidance.
Sure.
Good afternoon, Kenny Tate for the applicant. I believe there's a little confusion. The completion date that you're referring to during the master lease has a rent payment, has a starting rent payment. It gets reduced for a brief period of time during the construction, and then it goes up to the new amount at the end of completion of construction. The completion date that you're defining has to do with that rent structure. It does not have to do with an outside date to complete the improvements. However, we have discussed with individual commissioners and have agreed. We've had a request to put an outside date for the promenade, and I believe possibly the parks, which we have agreed to do. It's not currently in the lease, though.
Okay, that hasn't been shared with me, so I have no idea what
That was 10 years or the completion of the last building, whichever
That's
is.
correct.
That's for what?
That's for the promenade.
Right, I'm talking about the improvements, not, there's a
in order-
separate section about promenade completion.
Right.
This is,
What we've agreed to shorten that. The way it currently reads is we can't exercise the second 50 years without the promenade being completed. We shorten that to we can't exercise the 50 years if the promenade has not been completed within 10 years.
But Kenny, we're talking now about the overall completion of the.
I understand that.
But is it 12 years? It can be less than 12 years, or it has to be
Currently
12
is
years?
no limit on the construction time period. The
I thought it was
completion
12
date has to do with the rent structure.
Right, but I thought, Alan, you just mentioned maximum of 12 years for completion date.
that's what it says, 12th anniversary of the
Yes,
start
but the
date.
use of the word completion date only refers to the rent, the payment.
Right, but there's no other provision that indicates when you're going to start or when you plan on finishing.
That's correct, but we're willing to give you an outside date. In other words, if we don't complete the promenade within 10 years, we lose our rights for the second 50 years.
But that just deals with the renewal. I'd like to know.
That's a big risk for us.
No, it is, but what the feedback that I'm getting is they want to know when it's going to start and the outside limits as to when you're going to finish, not just the promenade, but the improvements on the property.
The construction would be subject to, market conditions and force majeure, obviously, so.
Right, because right now, the way we read it, they'd have up to 50 years.
That's correct, and we're willing to tie the promenade and the parks to a much shorter time frame.
Right, so technically.
Don't build out.
No, but technically, the way it's written, and that's why I want them to be assured that for when it comes to the residential buildings, you technically have 50 years to build them.
That is correct.
Okay.
But keep in mind, I can't, from a
Gotta tighten that up a
marketability
little
standpoint, it's not going to happen.
Alan, as you know, we have to first get a site plan. Under the site plan, there's a time period for purposes of vesting the site plan. So the construction, at least the initial construction, will be a function of your code as regards to.
Yeah, but it's not going to take 50 years, Barry.
What's that?
I know we're slow sometimes, but not 50 years.
No, it's not 50 years.
No, but that's what your agreement says. You have up to 50 years.
No. The agreement doesn't, the agreement talks about term. Your question was, when will you be constructing the improvements? And all I'm saying is that in order to be able to develop that, it's going to be complying with your code as to the time period of your site plan.
Understood, but I believe what the commission wants to know is if 15 years from now, when they look at that property.
There is no schedule of construction. It's a function of market and being able to develop to the market.
Okay, so it could sit there for 50 years.
Right. So I don't think that's good. I mean, talking about one-stop shop, for example, Alan, don't we say with one-stop, like you have to build within 3 years, I think?
They have to, yeah, 3 years.
They have to build within 3 years. So I think we've got to have some kind of expectation of the improvements.
Yeah,
Not
I
just,
think we need a build-out date.
Yeah, we need a, yeah, I mean, you said the promenade, what, 10 years for the promenade? Within maximum 10 years. So I think we need a maximum of the rest of the improvements.
And not to skip ahead, but I am going to.
So, well, what happens with, so it sounds like applicants are they going to come back to you with suggestions or?
I don't know, because that depends. I need direction. If you're not happy with that, we're going to have to negotiate that to something else. Because to jump ahead, I don't like to jump ahead in Article 11, 11.1.6, it says there's no requirement pursuant to this lease as to the timing or phasing of improvements which may be made to the premises. So that's an open book. So to the extent you want commitments, you need to tell me that you do want to do that, and then we'll have to go back and negotiate with them something.
I think we do need a schedule. I don't know what the schedule would look like because I'm not a developer, but I think we do need some sort of schedule. So,
or some kind of milestones where, without it necessarily being a schedule, I think Vice Mayor, it would be a milestone with, let's say within 5 years, you're going to have this. Within 10 years, you're going to have that type of situation.
And then I would hope in that, if we're calling it milestones instead of phasing, that we would have some sort of guarantee and protection that, the boat show will be able to operate, and we will have, the public will have access to this part.
Well, those are in separate sections. That this here we're dealing with that issue, and that's not unusual in our leases. Like with War Memorial and others, there's any lease we enter to at the airport, there's commitments to improvements, and they have to do it within a certain amount of time. Otherwise, they can just sit on the land. And I'm not saying them, but I'm saying any of our lessees could sit on the land and do nothing for.
So, Alan, can you negotiate those milestones?
We can try and do that. If you don't have any additional feedback as to what timeframes you're looking at, I mean.
It just needs to be much tighter than it is now.
Okay. I think we resolve, with regards to the site plan definition, I think they've committed to the fact that the site plan that's referenced in this, and I believe every other, in the phase lease as well as the master declaration, would be the conceptual plan that they've presented to you and not the 2017 plan. Is that correct?
Okay. My understanding.
Okay. Yes. So that's resolved. The next section, Vice Mayor, in definitions you raise with special functions. The way we read it, and they can correct us, but
Alan, excuse me. Yeah. The current site plan, we are about to break ground on the Marina Village, which is approved in the current site plan.
Right.
If the new lease, which could go in effect before we build the Marina Village, is the new site plan, and we lose the old site plan, we can't build the Marina Village. So we need the existing site plan until the new site plan is approved.
And I'm not suggesting that we would negate the other one, but it needs to be clear in the agreement that going forward.
That I'm
right.
fine with.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all we're concerned about.
But finish your, sorry.
Right, no, I know. Yeah. But that's what we'll commit to.
Just finish your thought. I think I know what you're saying, but.
I'm sorry, what was my thought?
Are you going to carve out the Marina Village? You carve out.
Well, no, it's not so much of a carve out. It's just
Moving
what we
forward.
want is we want language in here to make it abundantly clear
Yes.
that any future development beyond the Marina Village,
Right.
when it
Correct.
comes to the residences, because like Ms. Solomon pointed out, the number of permitted units in the old site plan is far greater than the new site plan. So they would have to commit within this master lease that any new residential units and so on and so forth would be on the conceptual site plan as delineated in here without affecting the Marina Village itself.
Yes,
And
and
then
are we-
DRC will have to deal with whether they have to modify the old site plan or whether they're just going to make an amendment, whatever it is that DRC can deal with.
But it's going to be clear, right, that there is that maximum use in terms
Yes.
of condition, 350 plus 60, not the old 650.
That's my intent, yes.
Yeah, that has to be really clear.
Yeah. Now, well, it is in a separate section, but we want to tighten that language up to make sure, because there's a lot of references to site plan. We needed to make sure that we tied it to the conceptual site plan for future improvements.
And Alan, how does, if I was understanding some of the comments earlier, the new site plan requires a zoning change, is that right?
I don't know about. That would deal with DRC, and that would only trigger once they submit that. I know anecdotally I've heard that, but
Okay.
it wouldn't necessarily affect the master lease. That would be a process of the regulatory section of our regulatory hat.
Right.
That would be in Anthony's shop.
But does the commission have to approve a zoning change on the barrier island for this?
Depending on the height, potentially, but again, that would be post lease agreement. That would be through the DRC process. You're not going to that's not going to be part of your
Sure, it
lease.
goes through the DRC process, but comes to the commission.
Well, I don't know. I'd have to ask Anthony. It depends what the site plan actually calls for.
Right. So I think we've got to figure that out, because my question is, how does that impact the lease if like zoning is not approved of the new site plan?
Well, then they wouldn't be able to build to the height that they want to, and that they'd have to come back.
Okay, so is that going to be stipulated in the lease?
Well, no, that's a function of the site plan.
Yeah, that's just a
process.
given.
It's a function of the site plan.
You're right.
So, okay, so then if the new zoning's not approved, then the lease is not in effect?
No.
It is in effect?
No. Yeah, because we'll get to that also, but the only default provision is monetary. So the only time you're going to be able to default on this is for a failure to pay.
The only way the applicant could default.
You can't get out of this lease unless there's a failure to pay. Let's
Right.
put it that way.
So,
right.
yeah, so I think.
That's how your current lease is now.
Right, so I think that's got to be adjusted, that default provision.
Well, no, not necessarily, because so for example, if they want, they pick a number for height, and and you put that in your master lease, but they have to go 10 feet less. Okay, you're not going to default them out of that and kill the lease for 10 feet. They have financing they have to, get a hold of. There's all kinds of things those things are contingent upon. So that wouldn't necessarily be a default. It's
But
not
that
unusual.
affects our revenue. See how that affects our revenue? If they can't go as high?
There's no guarantees that unless you have a site plan right there in there you have approved, there's not going to be any guarantees. So Anthony's folks may say, you know what, you need a loading dock over here. You should have had that in your plans. It's not there. You're going to lose a unit because of it. There's no way to control that.
Right.
So these are estimates. They're estimates. I mean, these are all estimates when it comes to revenue. As you correctly pointed out before, it's going to ebb and flow depending on what sales are, whatever else. They're projecting to build, as with any project we get, although usually we get it a little later with an actual site plan because it's not part of a lease, it's just a site plan approval. But they're projecting to build X amount of units. Only the DRC process and the regulatory process is going to dictate whether they can do that or not.
Maybe I'll ask it a different way. Is the milestone requirements that we're talking about inserting, are those do those remain without impact due to DRC feedback and adjustment?
Well, there's always going to be a little bit of language in there. So there's force majeure, obviously, that affects some of
absolutely.
those things.
Yeah.
So those things usually take care of those types of situations. And that's why you build a broader window rather than a tight window. So if we say you're going to build it in a year, that's not reasonable. So you give yourself some buffer time, whether it be 5 years, because then that accommodates for those types of things. But that's why the milestones are very general. So what you want to ensure with a milestone is that somebody's not going to sit on the property and they're going to commit to redeveloping it. So they're going to be starting with the Marina Village, and you want a commitment from them that within 5 years, or within 3 years, within 4 years, they're going to start on the reasonable portion, or they're going to start on the promenade.
Yeah, so I think you're saying yes, within, reasonableness, DRC determination will not negate milestone expectation.
Not necessarily, but there are things like, again, like force majeure, right, yeah. And everything is subject to any agreement you enter into. If I'm not going to relate it to a national catastrophe because that would be under force majeure, but there are always things that could possibly change that they'd have to come back and say, okay, look, we tried everything we could, but we can't make it on the 5th year. It's going to be 5 years and 1 month.
Okay. So what you're saying is the process would be them coming back for approval from the commission?
Not approval. If you're going to change, no, but if you're going to amend the lease, the milestones are meant to be general. To again ensure that they're going to diligently start, but you're not going to get into the minutia of micromanaging their actual construction, right? So you're going to have these broad periods of time and let them do what they do. And if it gets to be a problem, then we either address it by amending the lease, which hasn't really occurred in any of our leases yet. But that would be an option, but typically that's why you choose a broad enough window where it takes into account those potential
The changes at DRC.
Right.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
The next section deals with the special functions. Vice Mayor, you had raised that before. So the way we read it, and they can correct us if we're wrong, but right now the way it's written with the special functions, if it's hotel related, they're unlimited. If it's non-hotel related, it would be 6 per month. And if it's more than 6 per month, they'd have to come to the city commission for approval. And I know that was an issue for some, so that's one issue that.
We have to lower that number.
We just agreed to 2 per month on that.
A 2 per month what?
In the parks.
Right, for the special functions. However, the way it's defined now, if it's hotel.
Including the hotel functions. We would need special permission from the city to go beyond the 2.
Okay, so that includes somebody wants to have a wedding in the park or in the promenade or something else that anything's going to go through the.
Nothing's really going to happen in the promenade, but in the park, yes. After 2 per month, they'd have to get the city manager to approve it. And he always has the right to refer it to the city commission.
So you've gone from 6 to 2?
Right.
And eliminating the unlimited for the hotel related.
That's correct.
So
Wait, what was that? Unlimited what?
Because right now they have unlimited hotel functions. They would they get rid of those, and then they would only be allowed 2 functions per month. If they want to exceed that, they'd have to come to the city.
This is for the big park in the back.
Right,
The
regardless
small
from-
little park in front of the hotel.
Whether it's
the hotel can
well,
use.
that's different. The one in front of the hotel is different.
But the big park in the back, we would
On
limit
the
it to 2
intercoastal.
times.
Okay, well, we need to clarify that because under special functions, it defines the premises as including the promenade and no parks.
Yes, we're agreeing.
Okay, so the promenade, okay.
Promenade in the parks, 2 times max.
Okay.
And can I get a
Promenade, we're not.
No, I know.
0.
I'm just going with what's on the agreement. That's what it says. So that's
0 on the promenade.
Yeah.
Well, then you have the boat show to deal with.
Except for
The
the
show
boat
has
show.
unlimited.
That's the exception.
2 per month, can I get a time definition of what it would be? Like one event would be, let's say.
A weekend at the most.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're taking 2 weekends again. So I'd say like 8 hours max. Like
I'm not sure.
that's why I don't want an event to be a whole weekend.
I just don't know about setup, but let me talk to the hotel, but let's shoot for the 8 hours. 2 nights, 2 evenings a month for the 8 hours. Okay.
And I'm
2
kind of just
times.
throwing out 8 hours. I don't know about the setup and breakdown either, but I just wouldn't want it to be taking up 2 whole weekends, and then a special permitted event would be another weekend. So then once again, you're still kind of losing it. So
Well, we have to approve special events.
correct, but the special event is typically a whole weekend. Because it's,
It depends. Some are 1 day, some are 2 days.
right, I just wouldn't want the special function to be a whole
Remember,
weekend.
most special events are open to the public. If it's a food and wine festival or
Yeah, that-
art
that's
show.
yeah,
or
that's
something
different.
like that.
I just wouldn't want the special function to take up half of our weekends, Friday through.
Well, if
Sunday.
it's a private function, I get it. But if it's a public function, like a food and wine festival, like
I
a
agree.
flea
That's-
market or something,
That's the special permitted, function.
So
Right
do
now,
we
we're on
want to
the-
limit the two to private functions?
Yes.
private functions
The
per month.
special functions that the hotel would have would be 2 at the most for no longer than an
8 hours, fine.
8-hour event type thing. So that means they're only taking it, 2 nights or something. That's better.
So we're good on that? All right, so, on the term 4.1, obviously, it's 50 years. And then the question would be, and I guess more of a confirmation, that the second 50 years would not be requested or be able to be requested until after the promenade is completed? Okay,
Well, in 10 years.
right,
It has to be completed in 10 years or they don't get the next 50 years. That's what we just
Right.
said.
right. So 10 years for the promenade?
We agreed with the mayor earlier of completion of the building, the condo buildings, the hotels on the promenade. There's 5 buildings, 3 residential, the hotel and the commercial. Upon completion of the earlier of the completion of those, or the 10 years, is the outside date we have to complete the promenade. And to get the second 50 years.
Right, and just for clarity, and I'm not sure because it's not, are you building the promenade in phases as you're going through, or you're going to build the improvements and then do the promenade?
It'd be better to build it all at once after the, well,
You're riding your bike and all of a sudden this.
No, we need to know because that may
Yeah.
affect.
Like the city sidewalks.
no phases once, because the buildings are as each
Right.
building's built, they're going to be destroying the promenade
Right.
around it.
So the contemplation is for the promenade to actually be built after the improvements, correct?
Or coincide with the final building
Like the
of
bike
the
path.
buildings on the promenade.
Okay. So just so you're aware that the promenade's going to be built, I don't want to say last, but it's not going to be
Well,
built
within
first.
10
and-
years.
Right,
Yeah.
What about the public park? Do we have a benchmark or milestone or timeline?
We need some open area for mobilization so that, between the public park and the north finger, we need those areas for construction purposes.
so we'll try to get some time frame for that as well,
Yeah.
Vice Mayor.
'Cause I definitely don't want to see A1A used as staging or construction or any of that, because that'll be a mess.
And we totally agree. And that's one of the advantages of this new site plan for the boat show is, as Jimmy mentioned earlier, the 2017 plan had no staging or mobilization for the boat show. And this new plan gives them the entire north finger plus some of the park in the back until they put up their tents. So, for them to argue about the new site plan, we've removed 5 buildings, so it only helps them. We didn't add any buildings.
The next section, we've already talked about where there's no requirement for any phasing of improvements or timing. So we're going to work on that to see if we can get some milestones. With the default section, this is more for informational purposes, but so you know, and I've stated previously, that the only cancellation or termination of the lease is if there's a default on the payment of rents that are due, and obviously beyond the cure period. Otherwise, there's no non-monetary defaults. We obviously have legal rights to get injunctive relief and things of that sort, or self-help to a certain extent if it's life safety issues. But it is as it is now. It's not commercially unreasonable. It's not novel, but your only default is for monetary non-payment.
Well, should we have more protections in that?
Well, it comes down to what's commercially reasonable. You can, to the extent, however, with this type of property, you have a lot of subleasing and sub-subleasing. There's a lot of financing involved, and there's a lot of the leaseholds can be financed. So you do get into impacts of, if you default against the lessor, you can have those protections in there, but the sub-lessees are going to step in as your lessee, and you're going to step in the foot or in the place of the lessor. So it does get complicated. I don't know additional protections you can have in there. We'd have to talk to them about that.
Alan, remember, on non-monetary, if you step in and do what we were supposed to do, and then you bill us for that cost. It becomes a monetary.
No, I understand. I just, to the commissioner's point, though, I think he's looking for protections where we can terminate the lease for a non-monetary issue that may be continuing, correct?
Yeah, I mean, what other protections could we have?
What type of defaults are you thinking of, other than not providing insurance?
Right.
Not maintaining the property, both of which you can do and they become monetary defaults.
So for example, I'll give you an example, but
Yeah,
you
I'll come
wouldn't
up
necessarily default on it. But let's say
Right.
they've agreed to be a 4-star or 5-star hotel, right?
Right.
That's non-monetary.
Yeah.
Let's say they say, yeah, you know what, we're just going to be a 2-star, we don't care. So that's non-monetary. It's technically, they're not abiding by the agreement. In that scenario, I'd basically have to go to court and force them to abide by or that provision. I couldn't terminate the lease because they've decided not to do that. I'm not saying they would, because it doesn't serve their interest, but that's just an example, a
Right.
simple example of that.
Right, so that's an example. I mean, I could probably think of a bunch, but again, this isn't my expertise. The benchmarks, failing to meet promenade benchmark.
Yeah, I mean, you could hold their feet to the fire with regards to, right, they're already be penalized by not being able to get the additional 50 years, which would impact potentially their ability to construct the other buildings. It gets tough to default someone for non-monetary reasons when you have so much intricate financing. There's banks that are going to be involved as well that have mortgages, that they're going to have rights, as they do now. So,
So you don't think in the city's interest we need to have any further default protections? It's fine if you don't.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I don't think they're possible because, one, they wouldn't agree to them. It would make no sense for them to agree to it. I can propose it, but I don't think they're going to agree to it. It's going to be, I think, commercially unreasonable and probably commercially very difficult for them to do that.
Okay, so you don't think we should have any others in there?
We could have all kinds of things in there. It's not a matter of whether that's a business decision as to whether you want that or not. You have protections in here now.
Okay.
But if you want to default them for any reason that's non-monetary, that gets very tricky in any lease because you provide no security whatsoever. You basically give the city the ability to pull the plug anytime that there's a default, and it's hard to get into business with folks that way.
Okay, all right. So are you all good with the default section? Is that great? Mayor?
I think that's a common default provision. You're
Great.
talking about finding them in default for a breach of a covenant within the lease agreement, and I think that that's always subject to a cure, just like the
Everything's subject to a cure, yeah.
right. So any of those provisions are eligible for default, but I don't know whether or not that's really going to apply in a situation like this. What covenants are we talking about for default?
Well, for example, if they breach any sort of the milestones, or like I gave the example, they decide we're just going to do a 2-star hotel, forget the 5-star, those types of things that could come into play. Some of it, as we've stated, or as it's stated in here, we have the ability to self-help if they fail to cure, and we go in and we give them the bill. So we're protected. It's just that from a default standpoint, I just wanted you to be aware that when it comes to terminating the lease, this long-term lease, you're only going to be able to do it if they fail to pay.
Okay, all right. I'm good.
And I just wanted to clarify, because I've heard it in Article 18, it refers to a hotel with 4-star rating. I've heard anecdotally that they possibly have agreed to 5 stars, but I don't know if that's true, so I wanted to get that clarification today.
How about 4 or better?
And who evaluates
That's the
stars?
standard. It's by nationally recognized the hotel rating system, and if there isn't that, they generally are certain, especially since this will be branded. The brand is typically a 5-star, so that there's a measurement. We use third parties to measure that.
Cool.
Alan, I know you're up to Article 17 already, and even though this was not in your memorandum, when we met one-on-one, we had a couple of other little things like 11.1.2 about the city manager having a lot of approval process.
Yeah, I'm getting to that in
Are you-
section 32 because
Okay.
it has a listing of all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Rather than go hodgepodge, I decided.
Gotcha. Okay, I thought you were going in order of the articles. Thanks.
Yeah.
Sections.
Article 21, use of property. This is just basically, there's no This is what's represented with the different units. I think this is consistent with what has been presented before, the 350 branded apartment units. It's just pointing you to this is the business terms that were represented. That might have been tweaked today for some reason in discussing the financials, but I just wanted you to be aware of this section 21.1.
Alan, does the condo association pay the city at some point?
That's going to be, we can just, yeah.
Is that later?
Right, yeah,
Okay.
when we deal with the phase lease.
There's a condo rent.
Right.
Originally, it was presented, I think earlier to us as $1 per square foot, but I think Ken relayed some of the things that some of us have been working on, moving that up to $1.25.
Yep. Okay, cool.
The next section, 21.8, this is just illustrative for the boat show. Now, the boat show is referenced in all three agreements. In the master agreement, this is the section that deals mostly with it. Again, representations with regards to unit owners and their guests not being able to, they're stopped from objecting to the activity of the boat show. They take it subject to the boat show. The stronger language is in the master declaration because that's really what regulates the various parties that'll be using the property. But this is, again, just to bring to your attention the language dealing with the boat show. In section 22.1, just bringing your attention to the fact that it is the current case now, as it is with any of our leases when it comes to assignment. Obviously, if Ron Bahia Mar wants to assign to Corporation X, they have to come and get our approval for that. But to the extent that there is any sort of internal structure change within Ron Bahia Mar, if you have a majority stakeholder come in and buy a majority portion of it, it remains Ron Bahia Mar. But we don't have a say one way or the other as to the corporate makeup of that particular entity. Nothing unusual about that. It's standard, but I just wanted to bring your attention to it. In section 22.6, one of the other issues we talked about is if you agree to this master lease, you also are agreeing to the phased leases, meaning that once you enter into this master lease, you are going to be required to enter into phase leases for each of the residential buildings. So that comes hand in hand. So that's just, again, something to point out to you. It's not commercially unreasonable, it's not unlawful, but it's just something to bring to your attention that once you're in this lease, when the phase leases come, you're going to have to enter into them because that's the only way they're going to be able to manage and actually deal with each of those particular individual residential properties. In the miscellaneous provisions, again, this is more, and we'll discuss it based on the feedback we've gotten today, but it gives in section 38.12 as well as 38.2 the various rights that they have with regards to the promenade, keeping in mind that you do want them to have private rights to the promenade to the extent that they can exclude loitering, folks, trespassers, people that are unruly. You want them to have the ability to do that to control the property, but that does give them a right to exclude members of the public at their discretion, although it's represented that it would be for purposes of loitering and so on and so forth, but that's just, you're aware of that as well. But that's listed in there. We'll go through that with them based on the feedback we received from you, Vice Mayor, and the others with regards to public access. Okay, now the section that Commissioner, you were referring to with the city manager and all the power that he has. So section 38.12, there's a variety, I'm sorry? 38.12, 38.12. And it's on page 6 of my memo if you have it. There's a variety of listings there from little I to Roman numeral 17 that the city manager would have the ability to, or the authority to make decisions on these things. This is something you should probably review so we can get feedback from you as to what you're comfortable with the city manager approving versus what would come back to the city commission. First one is the exercise of lessor's rights to entry and inspection. Not a problem. City manager can well handle that. The exercise of lessor's right to determine rent by virtue of authorized adjustments and fair market value rent to the extent provided in this lease. that's something that's up to you, whether you want the city manager to be able to do that or whether you want evaluation of the fair market rent to come to you. There's a whole formula set out in these agreements as to how we reach that for any of the subsidiaries that would be subleasing or sub-subleasing. So whether you want the city manager to be able to sign off on that, or
All right.
whether you all, I think.
What do y'all want?
I don't think so. I think that subleasing should, I mean, I think that should come before the commission. I don't think the city manager wants that responsibility either. So I think as many, if there's simply ministerial acts, I think that we would want to defer to the city manager. But
Yep, makes sense.
something as substantive as that, I think that the city commission should participate.
So the exercise of lessor's right or obligation to approve subleases and sub-subleases to the extent approval is required. I don't know that you want every sublease to come to you.
The sub-subleases, like for a store or something, I mean,
Well, the sublease could be a store also. So I don't know, I mean,
Whatever you think,
the city
Mayor.
manager would have
With
the
me.
authority to do that. Obviously, the city manager,
What do
I'm
we
sure,
do
would
now?
inform you.
what do we do now? I mean, on
Well-
our other property, our other lease properties, don't we have to approve it?
Right, well, technically, we have that right, it just never has been really exercised.
Well, I mean, when we lease out the shops in the parking garage, they all come before the city commission.
Yeah, no, those do, but to the extent, I thought you were asking about BMR right now. BMR right now can
Talking about
sublease.
in general, our other properties, Bryan Homes, all those properties, they all come before the commission.
Those do as leases, but not necessarily the subleases.
So you want to do like a certain amount of square feet, if it's under 3,000 square feet, let the city manager just have that permission? Because I don't want to junk up our agendas with things like that, right?
Yeah, I think that's something the city
So
manager.
if it's under 3,000 square feet, I have no problem with just letting the city manager, enter into that lease.
I'll talk to them about that, that might be tough to manage.
I don't know if we need to really,
What's that?
I don't think we really need to see it.
I don't either,
personally.
but I mean,
That's
small,
all.
but larger leases that may impact, I don't know.
I mean, that might
What do you
keep
think?
businesses from wanting to come with getting all
Well, I'm
tied up.
just
Mr. Mayor, the city manager always has the right to defer any of these decisions to the city
Well, he has the
commission.
right. but
So
the-
that's something you can explain to them on how you would like him or her in the future to proceed.
Well, why don't we just provide a call-up provision if necessary?
That's
let
basically
the-
what it is then, if the city
The
manager.
city manager,
Well, we wouldn't necessarily have that in the agreement.
Just give it to the city manager. It's gonna be fine. He'll,
all right, okay.
we can,
Sub leases will
Yeah.
leave up to the city manager.
got it. Don't screw it up, Chris.
Well, I'm thinking about the city manager in year 57.
Chris is still gonna be here.
God bless them.
Gonna be making him and Pickles'
Chris and-
grandson.
It will be
For the,
different.
Okay. So rather than go through each one, because it's taking time, we can make some recommendations. So to delegate, so the technical non-material matters such as approving the corrections in the legal description, the city manager can do that.
Yes.
Approval of a certificate of insurance, absolutely. Exercise of the city's right of inspection, no problem, we already covered that. The right to execute easements, only not restrictive covenants, that's fine. The right to consent and join in on development applications, that shouldn't have to come to you at all. Execution of estoppel letters, we do that all the time, that doesn't come to you. And then obviously, if you want, the city manager can, of course, provide you reports of any actions he takes otherwise.
Alan, above that in 38.2V, that talks about the promenade again. But when you just deal with
Yes.
the promenade, you'll clean it up in all of these articles?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, because you're correct, there is language that does, shall be limited to permitted times and so on
Right.
and so forth. Again, keeping in mind that you are going to want to have an open and closed type date, so we don't have, people at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning walking around and causing problems.
Right. No entertainment district for the promenade.
Correct.
We can quickly go to the phase lease.
Do we
Some
get
of
to the special functions? Chris is gonna, city manager would approve that?
I'm sorry?
What-
That would go through our regular process.
Okay, so the special functions, which was the 2 per month that we discussed.
Yeah.
That's Chris, special events, the city commission.
Yeah. we go through our normal process for that. With regards to the phase lease agreement, some of it's repetitious, so I'll skip those. Just so you know that, and I think we've talked about it today, all the units residential are going to be branded. You're going to have the branded hotel, the 60 in the hotel, but all the other ones will be branded as well. We've already talked about the completion date, so we'll talk with them about that. Again, because the phase leases are in the future, and we don't know, we're not going to know who we're necessarily entering those phase leases into with. So
Right.
That's impossible to tell depending on who the development is going to be. The other sections with the lesser sales fee, transfer fee, you all discussed that earlier. We'll make sure that the agreement coincides with the tweaks that we heard about today with regards to the financial models. With the sales fee, I think there were some changes in some of the numbers, so we'll need to make sure that that's reflected in the agreement. Again, similar language with promenade completion and substantial completion that mimics a lot of what was in the master lease, so we'll just follow along with what we discussed in the master lease. The site plan referral in here, I just wanted to verify with them that their site plan references are obviously to the conceptual plan and or the site plan for the actual building itself, which I believe they've already confirmed. The term, again, 50 years. They need that clean 50 per the condo statute. The extended term, we do have one question, Barry, possibly for you or Kenny. On the phase lease with the extended term, you have language in there regarding with any remaining renewal options plus 10 years. I don't know what that refers to, but we can't go beyond 50 and 50. So I don't know what that exactly means.
Our phase lease is 50 and 50, but since the start date of the phase lease may be a few years after the start date of the master, we capped it at the master lease plus 10.
Okay, but we just can't add more. It can't be more than 100 years.
I understand the phase lease is only 50 plus 50, but the start date might be year 3. So it would be, the start date of the phase lease might be year 3, and then it's 50 plus 50. So the phase lease is only a max of 100.
Okay.
It's a maximum of 100 for that particular lease.
Well, we
Right,
did it, we put an outside date.
Right, you can't go outside the master lease.
Before we had, you had mentioned earlier you wanted some completion date of the construction. Currently, there is none, so we had a maximum that the start date, regardless of when the start date of the phase lease is, it couldn't go more than 110 from when the original master lease.
Right.
So the phase lease is only 100 years.
Right, but you can't go beyond the master lease.
Well, if it doesn't start till the third year.
You can't go beyond the master lease. That's by charter. You can't get more than 100.
Okay.
Similar language again with no timing for development of improvements. We'll talk about that. We've already discussed that with you. On the default here, just one nuance. We did talk about it. When the developer still has the building and it hasn't been branded and converted over to a regime, you can only default and terminate based upon non-payment. After this is turned over to an actual regime, there's no way for you to terminate the lease. So just be aware of that. So the phase leases, once it's been turned over to a regime or an association, it cannot be terminated for any reason. Just be aware of that.
Is that good for the city, Alan? Is that's
well, it's not unusual. I mean, in a condo situation, that's basically standard, my understanding, because again, you're selling something in fee simple. There has to be some security there. It's not in perpetuity. It can't be in perpetuity because it's on public land. But it's a little difficult to have someone purchase in fee simple something that the city technically could take away at any point in time. So I think that's the only way you can do it.
So let me ask you this, Alan. What, in Florida statute, you're required to renew your documents after 50 years, I think. Every 50 years, you're required to renew your documents.
Not sure.
Yeah, there's a number. Okay. Because I'm aware of, there's a statute, okay. What happens if the association fails to renew their documents? And they're no longer an association? Something to think about. Yeah, Barry. You have to renew your documents after a certain number of years. I can't hear you.
The association will need to be current and good standing, so they'll keep that as current and good
Yeah,
standing.
but it's sometimes it slips through the cracks. Okay, so we should give them notice and a right to cure, but I just want to make sure that the city isn't left in some sort of limbo.
They're
where
not. The city always has the right to, they're a third-party beneficiary. If they're not getting paid, they can foreclose on the individual apartments that they're not getting paid on.
So it would be a transactional basis, a financial
I mean,
basis.
it's a backup. It's not expected. The association is going to be the collection agent. But
Right.
if for any reason the city wanted to go directly against the apartment owner that didn't pay their obligation, they
Right.
could foreclose and take over that unit.
So that would be the remedy. Okay,
That's already in there.
okay,
That is in there.
all right, okay.
As Barry mentioned with lien rights, the association is going to act as our collection agent. So, protest. And we'll talk with them a little bit more about that to make sure that the city has adequate protections to protect ourselves if the association for some reason does not. I'm not going to belabor that with you. With regards to rent, again, we'll tweak that as it may have been tweaked today. There is one language in there in 26.4 that the lessee, meaning Bahia Mar, shall not be required to pay sales, use, or other similar taxes on the annual rent. My recommendation is that they do, that we should not be responsible for that.
Can we just stop for a second? I want to revisit the issue I just came up with because I was just going through my mind what happened in the situation that I was in. A person owns a piece of property within the association. The association is not renewed. They don't have the enforcement powers to collect on unpaid assessments. And that's why that scenario will not work. Unless there's an enforcement, there has to be something that defaults to the city to allow us to collect
Mayor,
assessments.
that's what it does. That's what I tried to explain, and I probably didn't do it properly for you.
Okay.
But the association is the collection agent. The city is a third-party beneficiary with a direct right to be able to foreclose any obligation that isn't paid. So even if the association, they just thumb their nose to you or they didn't do it, the city can do it directly.
But if the association documents are no longer valid because they weren't renewed, we aren't a third-party beneficiary at that point.
The lease document gives you that right. It'll be both in the lease document and in the condo document. So even if I think.
So the lease document
the lease document gives you that right also.
Okay, as long as it's in the lease document.
It's in the lease document.
Okay.
Yep.
Alan, you mentioned some numbers before, but when Ken was going over the numbers, those were what I had in my notes from talking with the tenant, the increase in the marina rent. But the one that Ken did not mention was the increase in the commercial rent. And he only still had it at 5.50%. And I think in my discussions with the tenant, we were able to get it up to 5.75%. If you could just make a note of that and confirm that with them.
5.75?
For the commercial rent. Marina rent is increasing from 5.75 to 6.25. Commercial rent increasing from 5 to 5.5. Condo rent increasing from $1 per square foot to $1.25 per square foot. And I think that's all the changes I have. Thank you.
Then Article 31 deals with more substantive language regarding the boat show activities. Again, they foreclose their rights to sue. They cannot deem it nuisance, noxious, or offensive activity. They take it subject to the boat show. The boat show has a right to be there. The regime documents are also required to reflect that. So again, it's long, but there's good language in there. Approval and consents, again, we've already gone through those with the city manager. They're consistent in the phase lease, so we'll follow that same guidance that you've provided us. Very quickly, we'll go through the master declaration. Again, let me skip some parts here. We've already talked about the approved site plan, although in there right now specifically it's defined as the 2017 based on the representations today. We'll make some adjustments to that. Same thing with regards to the promenade. We now have that guidance. Language regarding the shared facilities. We want to make sure that parks is included in there, but we've gotten guidance from you on that. Same with special functions. That'll be consistent with what we've talked about. Promenade, once again, there's language in there in Article 2 that will have to coincide, very similar to what's in the master agreement. We'll go ahead and coincide that with whatever negotiations we end up doing. The boat show lease, again, there's extensive language in Section 2.11 of the boat show lease, talking about all the protections in there for the boat show. Again, very long paragraph, but it's there for you in detail. It also includes in Section 2.13 an acknowledgement and waiver that you're taking your property subject to the boat show and all that comes with it, set up, take down, everything else. In 2.14, there's also extensive language about notice to future occupants regarding the boat show and all the various protections and waivers that come with it. The development section in 2.16A, again, I think the only question there was about the approved site plan, but I think we've gone ahead and clarified that. We've talked about the duties and powers of the association with them being the collection agent, but we just addressed that with the mayor and our third-party rights. And there may be some language that we suggest. Again, in some of these things, I'm not going to bother you with it, but there's going to be little tweaks that we're going to suggest, and we'll see if they're okay with that. With regards to the earlier conversation about Article 21, specifically 21.3, and I will read it for you since it was discussed before. It says, notwithstanding anything contained in this declaration to the contrary, as long as the boat show parties are current and in good standing under the boat show lease, and I believe they're going to be working on some language to that effect, in no event shall any of the provisions of Section 2.11 of this declaration, which inure to the benefit of the boat show parties, be amended, changed, terminated, or modified in any material manner by developer, the association, the board, and or the owners without the written consent of the boat show parties in its reasonable discretion. My recommendation to you is that the city also be included in that as in addition to the boat show.
Yes.
I agree, and also, my understanding is that any default is subject to notice and right to cure within a certain number of days. Is that correct?
Default by who? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Default by who?
By the boat show.
That would be within their lease.
Right, but
Mayor, we already agreed to that when I met with Danielle.
Yeah.
We already agreed that instead of saying current and good standing, that we would give them the cure period under their lease in order to cure.
Very good.
So once I get that language, I'll be able to include it. And then lastly, deals with termination. Pursuant to Florida statute, presumably, as long as the developer owns any parcel, this declaration may not be terminated without the approval of the developer. After the developer no longer owns any parcel, this declaration may be terminated upon the approval of a plan of termination by no less than 80% of the voting interests of all owners. There may be some language we want to add to that.
We've already agreed to add in both cases that would require the approval of the city also.
The city and the boat show, or just the city?
Just the city.
Okay. We'll talk about the one concern that was brought up is that if we can't modify the master declaration without the boat show, we should probably not terminate it without the boat show, but we can discuss that.
We can talk about it, but even if it were terminated, certain provisions that we're agreeing to would stay in effect even if the declaration were terminated.
Within the declaration or your existing lease?
Well, we're going to modify those. Those are some of the things I'll sit down and go over with you that I talked to Danielle about.
Okay, and that's generally the issues we had discussed and that I wanted to bring to your attention. If there's others, obviously you want to ask about, they're lengthy documents, we can certainly address those.
All right, well, you've gone through all those with, I know, all of us separately, so.
We have.
So,
Thank you, Alan. Good job.
Yeah.
all right, any other questions right now? Because we have a bunch of people wanting to speak. Now, let me just ask the commission how we want to go forward. I have about 20 people who signed up to speak. I assume most of them are still here. I do think we need to take a little bit of a break and come back. And when we do, maybe at 10 after 6, we'll start with our public comment. And then after we've had public comment, that issue is done because there's no vote to be taken. It's just direction now to the city manager and the city attorney. And then we'll have commission reports.
Mayor, I would suggest, we do have a lot of people waiting for proclamations. Could we possibly do
Oh, right, I forgot.
a
All right,
few
maybe we'll start.
proclamations? And
Proclamation. You want to do that first? Want to do the proclamations?
We have to then adjourn and then go to the evening meeting?
Yeah, that's what we'll do. All right, so we'll adjourn this meeting now and resume after we do the proclamations. Okay, that's fine.
then go
What
back
time
to-
are we coming back in here?
Well, about let's say 6:15, and then we'll do the proclamations. We'll open up the evening meeting, do the early part of the meeting, and then before we get into voting, we'll adjourn, and then we'll go back to public comment. So we'll probably all right. All right. Is hereby, what's the word? We're coming back after. It's not adjourned, it's recess until it's continued after the beginning of the evening meeting.